Ladies and gentlemen, let's start our job. It's traffic is too busy, but anyway, because our time is limited, you need to finish exactly 12:30, and a lot of people will come a little bit later. This is thank you all of you that you are here for this very, very important meeting, very important event, because this is the meeting not among some countries. This is, if you see the schedule, this is the meeting among continents. United States, Latin America, Brazil, Australia, also New Zealand, and people from Africa will be here, and Europe itself. And if it's needed, we have the professor who has information about India also. It's very important to cooperate our ideas about supplying Europe and other countries with raw materials and how negotiate about combat climate issues and to be together for next challenges, because nobody knows what could happen. I'm glad that we cooperate about raw materials idea, because if the crisis, raw materials crisis will come, it will be more stronger, more expensive than gas, than oil crisis, and more deeper, because raw materials strongly related by high-level technologies, strongly related by climate change issues, strongly related by competitiveness, and strongly related by standard of living. First of all, I want to say many, many thanks to my co-organizer, Mr. Ken Johansson. He is the key person, member of European Parliament and member of Liberals. And thank you, representative of Commission, Commissioner Potocnik, Commissioner Oettinger, and also DG Enterprise Raw Materials, Mr. Pellegrini. Also, people from representative different enterprises, industry, institutes, and also people who in charge in this very important issue. This is the long change of meeting coming from 2007, when some of participants in this issue found this first event 2007, when you first time present the raw materials problems in Europe. I'll be very short, because we have very interesting speakers, very interesting item, and then I expect that we will have a very interesting discussion. But I want to present shortly, very short, our speakers, because they're coming from far away. First of all, from Brazil, Professor Roberto Vilas-Boas, who is member of Council of International Mineral Processing Congress, which is highest level of this issue, mineral pretreatment, mineral beneficiation. He represents Brazil, and he is very close to industry, very close to science. He is very famous in our mineral processing fields. Professor Güvenönal represents Turkey. He's also member of Council, International Mineral Processing Congress. He's also chief chairman of Balkan Mineral Processing Congress, which is very important. And he's chairman of Turkish Mineral Foundation. He's very close also to industry, and he's professor of Istanbul Technical University. Professor Hanumanta Rao from Luleå University, Sweden. He's also fantastic speaker and investigator, and he's representative of Sweden now, but if it's necessary, if you have some questions, he have a lot of information about India. Unfortunately, the Dr. Pradeep from India didn't come from bureaucratic difference, but Professor Rao will explain us some information if it's necessary. Also, we expect Professor Herman Motruba from Aachen University, Germany. He is also welcome here in any time, and I'll give him the floor. Now, I want to give the floor my co-organizer, my friend, Mr. Ken Johansson, for a few words.
Thank you very much, Professor Panayotov, and I also want to say welcome, dear ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues, to this important seminar. I just want to say a few words saying that this topic of this seminar is very important according to the discussions and discussions that we have in the Parliament just now. I have, as Professor Panayotov said, the possibility to be the spokesperson and the negotiator for our group about the new research and innovation program Horizon 2020, where raw materials is of course a key factor. And we are just now negotiating the program between the Parliament, the Council and the Commission. So this is a very timely discussion also for the future. And also adding that we are in the Parliament about to start our negotiations on a new report, the new strategy Reindustrializing Europe. We will see where those negotiations lead, but I'm convinced that you can't have much a strategy without a clear focus on the supply and smart use of raw materials. So this is a very timely seminar, and I'm looking forward to the contributions and to the discussions. Once again, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken, and let's start. Also, we have a representative from embassies here, and we expect His Excellency Ambassador of Chile, Ms. Carlos Tapia, also to take part in second part in our discussion. Now, I give the floor Mr. William Neale, Member of Cabinet of Commissioner Janez Potocnik. Mr. Neale, please.
Thank you, Professor Panayotov, and I'm highly impressed by the array of experts that are here today. I feel very humbled to be speaking about a subject which most people in the room know far more about than I do. But I'll nevertheless try to set things a little bit in motion and set the scene for today's discussions. You mentioned already, Professor Panayotov, the very global context of the discussions. We have experts from all over the world, from different global regions, and I'll try and set, as the title suggests today, the challenges and opportunities for Europe in that global context a little bit. As we also have a speaker here, Maria, who's from the Director General for Enterprise and Industry. I guess that she will inform you a little bit more about the raw materials initiative and the raw materials innovation partnership that we set up. And I'll try and put things a little bit more in the context of how we see it from the perspective of Commissioner Potocnik, who is the Commissioner for Environment. But as many of you who are based in Brussels, at least here, will know, Commissioner Potocnik has taken a very keen interest in the relationship between our industrial policy, our strategic and economic policy, and our material needs, and their relationship to our competitiveness and also to the protection of the environment. So I'll try and explain a little bit how we see that articulation working between those policy areas, and explain why we're convinced that Europe's interests in terms of competitiveness are actually rather well aligned with those in respect of better material use and environment. The first point I'd like to make is that Europe is extremely import dependent for materials. We import 6 times as many materials as we export, and therefore our industries are very much dependent on international markets for those materials. And of course, we've seen, as you will know better than I do, very steep increases in prices over the last decade or so in those international markets compared to a couple of hundred years of real price declines, which has helped Europe's growth. It's really been the base of our industrial growth over the last couple of centuries. We've had rather expensive labour and rather cheap materials. So I would say that our efforts in terms of productivity, in terms of competitiveness, of the efforts of our companies, of our industry, has been very much targeted oriented towards increasing labour productivity because labour has been more expensive, and our resource productivity has rather, well, it's been less of a focus, shall we say. So we've seen a 300% increase in prices of materials between 1998 and 2011. That's actually having a direct impact on European businesses. We did what we call a Eurobarometer. We did a survey of European enterprises which found that 75% of EU businesses had experienced significant increases in material costs over the last 5 years, and 87% of those businesses expected that to continue over the medium term in the future. We're also pretty sure that it is going to continue. If you look at the megatrends, global megatrends, as you may know, the UN is estimating that we'll be at 9 billion population by 2050. More importantly, in terms of demand for consumer products and demand for materials, we'll be seeing 3 billion extra middle-class consumers around the world by 2030. So we predict that global extraction of minerals will continue to increase substantially from about 58 billion tons in 2005 to about 100 billion tons per annum by 2030, and that's a 75% increase by 2030, so in the next 15 or so years. So putting the European situation in that global context, we can see that really we have every interest to actually make better use of what we've got, better use of what we buy on the international markets. And I haven't mentioned the environment yet. This is really a competitiveness point that I'm making. It's essential for our future competitiveness. If you look at the percentage of if you look at the input costs by percentage of manufacturing business in Europe, the figures that I've seen for Germany say that 43% of manufacturing input costs for German companies in the manufacturing sector are materials, 18% is labour. So already twice of the costs, the input costs for those companies is for materials compared to their labour costs. And that's also far exceeding their energy costs. So this is really the reason, this is the logic behind Commissioner Potocnik from the beginning of his mandate taking a less legislative approach towards environment policy. We considered that we have pretty good environmental protection legislation for end-of-pipe protection, for dealing with problems and polluters, and taking a more economic view and saying that really resource efficiency has to be an integral part of our strategic economic policy. And our strategic economic policy is what we call Europe 2020. Those of you in Brussels will I hope, know it very well. We made resource efficiency from the outset of this Commission 3 years ago a flagship, one of the 7 flagships of Europe 2020. It was the only really new element. Most of the other flagships are evolutions, continuations of existing policies, whether that be innovation, industrial policy, social and employment policy, research, and so on. But it was clear from us that we needed to explain that logic to business, and we needed to have business on board to actually achieve our resource efficiency goals, and that we've made very strong attempts to do, and we have business very much involved in our guiding platform, which is helping us to implement our roadmap for resource efficiency. When we talk about resources, we're actually talking about very wide scope, not just materials, but also things like water, biodiversity, all kinds of resources. But here today, obviously, we're more concerned about materials. I think it's very important, and the Commissioner would always emphasize that when we talk about resource efficiency, we're not talking about deindustrialization of Europe. Quite the opposite. Of course, you use less resources in your economy if you have a bigger services sector and a smaller industrial sector. But what we're saying is that actually, if we want to maintain industry in Europe, we actually need to make sure that we're using those resources more efficiently. Our comparative advantage means that we have to do that. We are a resource-poor region and a knowledge-rich region of the world. and therefore we have every interest to make sure that our resources are being used efficiently. We actually estimate in our modelling that a 1% reduction in material use in Europe would result in 23 billion extra euros for business and between 100 and 200,000 jobs, so for a 1% reduction in material use. But I guess the issue for primary extraction sector is, will that reduction, if we're aiming to reduce our material use, is that not meaning that we're going to be digging less stuff out of the ground, and will that not mean less less turnover, less work, less jobs in the primary extraction sector? This is the issue that we've had around the concept of what we call absolute decoupling, which is to actually reduce our material use compared to our GDP. But I think if you look at those figures that I stated earlier, the phenomenal increase in prices of materials, the vast increase in middle-class consumption around the globe, the future of the primary extraction sector is pretty rosy, and their profits look fairly sure for the future. I think for the European Union, we really have no choice but to try to head for more effective and more efficient use of resources. We are in a situation of finite resources, and it's really just a case of, it's not really the hard laws of economics. I would say it's the soft laws of economics and the hard laws of physics. It's a case of having to exist within the finite limits of our planet and what it can provide for us. To deal with resource efficiency, and particularly material efficiency, I would say that we have three innovation challenges. The first, as I've already said, is really to increase resource productivity, so the amount of value added we get from each ton or gram of resources. And this will involve business. It's only business that can do it. It's business that created the revolution in labour productivity, and it will be companies and their creativity which will create the real gains in resource productivity. I think that market prices will drive that. But a study that we have read by McKinsey from 2011 estimated that only about 30% of the global increase in demand by 2030 could be met by increases in productivity of use of resources. So our second innovation challenge is really to say, well, actually, the resources that we use shouldn't just be, shouldn't end their lives being burnt in incinerators or buried in the ground at the end of a product's life. We need to go from that linear extract, produce, consume, throw away model to a circular economy model, a closed loop where we actually use the resources again and again and again, so that they can become unlocked from the products and we can actually pump them back into the economy. And this means designing products for recyclability. And here I know that Professor Panayotov has been making a very practical contribution to that in terms of how we deal with batteries at the end of their life recently. That's one very concrete example. We need to design for repairability, for durability, for material efficiency and for recyclability. We also need to make sure that markets are working so that those secondary raw materials are coming back to the right people that can use them. So we're looking at things like industrial symbiosis models, which have been tried very successfully in certain member states. I think the industrial symbiosis sounds very bureaucratic, an awful name. I've heard it called the eBay of things, the eBay of stuff. So it's basically a marketplace where you can actually buy and sell byproducts of industrial processes to people for whom they would be valuable. And we also need to make markets work by making sure that the quality of the secondary materials is fairly guaranteed and people are confident in that. So we need to work on solid end-of-waste criteria to define when waste becomes a raw material again. We also need to look at business models which would enable those resources to come back to people that can use them. So things like leasing, peer-to-peer leasing, where companies can actually get their products back and then get their materials back and reuse them. I think it's clear when you look at material use and our generation of waste in Europe that we need to go for a circular economy. We consume about 64 billion tons of raw materials entered the economic system in Europe in 2010, and that will go to 82 billion by 2020. But if you bring that down to sort of per capita level, it means that each of us is today consuming per year, I don't know if it's each of us individually consuming, but per capita the consumption of materials in Europe is about 16 tons per year. Of that, we're generating about 6 tons of waste, and about half of that, so about 3 tons, is just going directly to landfill. Obviously, that's over a period of a product's life cycle, but those figures, I think, are still instructive and illustrative of the fact that we're very much on a linear system in our production. And then the third innovation challenge, I mentioned the two, resource efficiency and circular economy. The third would be sustainable sourcing. And here, I'm no great expert, but obviously the majority of our materials will still be coming from primary extraction, and we need to work on making sure that that is done in ways which are having the minimum impact on the environment, and we need to be looking for substitutes and better materials. I will leave it there. I think one thing that I would say would be interesting for you to keep an eye out for is that we are launching a review of our waste legislation and policy in the next few months. This is, as I've already alluded to, quite important in respect of secondary materials. We already set aspirational targets in our roadmap for resource efficiency, for reusing, recycling, for reducing landfill and so on. And we'll be launching a public consultation on that fairly soon, so I'll be very interested, and the Commission will be very interested in having your input into that. We're looking at actually changing some of the targets that we have for waste. But I'll just conclude by saying that I think that what we need in terms of materials, raw materials in Europe is a very comprehensive approach. We need firstly to make better use of our natural resources. We need, secondly, to make sure that we have fair access to global resources. And I'm sure my colleague will be talking about that side a little bit more. And thirdly, we need to make sure that we're working on resource efficiency. And I think that you'll find that all three of those areas the Commission is working on very strongly through the various flagships of the Europe 2020 strategy, whether it be the industrial policy, whether it be innovation union, or resource efficiency, or several of the other areas that we're that are composing our main economic strategy. So, with that, I'll thank you, and I have to excuse myself because I have to leave for another meeting. But I wish you a very successful and interesting day of discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thanks to you, and also to Mr. Potocnik, Commissioner, who is very deep in this issue. In our last meeting, explained that Europe imports 6 times more materials and metals than export. Thank you for your substantial and very deep and very important review on how it is the situation in Europe, and I hope for your support for the future and for the next meeting also to be here. Now, continue. Ms. Maria Spiliopoulou, Kaparia, Deputy Head of Unit, Raw Materials, DG Enterprise.
Good morning, Professor Panayotov, Mr. Johansson, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present the work of the Commission on raw materials. I'm happy that William Neale, who preceded my presentation, explained Commissioner Potocnik's views, which are very much in line with Vice President Janez's views. And this is also why they are co-chairing, along with Commissioner Gigan-Quinn, the high-level group of the Innovation Partnership on Raw Materials, on which I will explain further in my presentation the state of progress. Having said that, this is a very good opportunity for me to explain the complementarities of the Commission policies. And William Neale referred to the resource efficiency flagship. I will refer to the innovation flagship and the industrial policy flagships, and you will see that all of them constitute a coherent structure, and that the raw material strategy indeed is a multi-functional work. So I will start by, let me just see, page down, yes. The raw materials strategy. Indeed, for the several reasons that William Neale explained, and you will see in the next slides, the Commission in 2011 endorsed the strategy which was issued back in 2008. And we identified, the Commission has identified the challenges of raw materials and proposed a three-pillar-based approach on raw materials. The three pillars are how to ensure the external aspect, how to ensure a fair and sustainable supply of raw materials from the outside world. The second pillar is how to get sustainable supply of raw materials within the European Union from EU sources. And the third is how to boost resource efficiency and promote recycling. The main raw material challenges, as explained and as you know, is the continuous growth by emerging countries, the pressure on the demand on raw materials, the demand which is also being driven by new technologies, and the result is that the EU is highly dependent on imports of crucial raw materials, which are increasingly affected by market distortions, while at the same time there is unexplored potential in the European Union itself. Therefore, one of the main challenges is also, and this is an issue in the second pillar of the raw materials initiative, is that within Europe we are still facing ongoing increasing competition from different land users. And this happens in a highly regulated environment. The raw materials initiative of the endorsed strategy of 2011 was also endorsed by the European Parliament and by the Council in 2011. And more specifically, there was a resolution by the European Parliament in September 2011 on an effective raw material strategy for Europe, whereby the European Parliament called on the Commission to keep it regularly informed on the developments in the area of non-energy raw materials in the framework of the Raw Materials Initiative, and on the fulfillment of the latter's objectives via an annual progress report. And in response to this call, the Commission has prepared a report. We are been preparing a report which is almost finalized. I mean, the internal procedures are being finalized, and we hope that we will have an adoption. It will be adopted by the Commission at the end of this month. We are continuing the work under the Raw Materials Initiative. There are a few examples of the work which we are pursuing under all three pillars of the Raw Materials Initiative. For example, we are reviewing the critical raw materials list. We have launched a study which is underway, and the objective is to have a report to the European Council and the Parliament, hopefully by the end of 2013, but this should not be taken as a promise, because this very much depends on internal procedures. Anyway, the work is underway. We have a meeting on a first meeting this week, and then with stakeholders next week to discuss the work which is being undertaken on the revision of the critical raw materials list. We have the work undertaken under the European Innovation Partnership. I'll explain about that a little bit later on. Under the first pillar, which is how to still get a fair access to raw materials from the outside world, we are pursuing, our Vice President Tajani is very keen on pursuing an active raw materials diplomacy, and he has signed a number of memoranda of understanding with countries, like, for example, many Latin American countries, and we are working on research issues with Japan and on policy issues with China and Greenland and the US. With the US, we have a dialogue undertake, the Transatlantic Economic Committee. Then, on the second pillar, we always present our work under the three pillars, because all three pillars for us are equally important. So under the second pillar, which is how to get better access to raw materials in the European Union, we are facilitating exchange of best practices between member states in trying to help them defining minerals policies, land use planning policies, and streamlining the authorization and permitting process. And on a specific request of the European Parliament, we have set up a European Rare Earth Competency Network. This network, which is called ERECON, will bring together experts from think tanks, industry, academia, policymakers, in order to advance the exchange of best practices on rare earth, increase the understanding of rare earth special properties, and make recommendations on research and promote recyclability, sustainable mining as substitution of rare earth. This network will be launched this year and should be active for roughly 2 years. And last but not least, very important, it is practically being half of our unit is dealing with that. The other half is dealing with following up the policy aspects of the raw materials initiative, is the innovation partnership on raw materials. It is clear that there is a need for innovation along the entire value chain of raw materials. The Commission adopted a proposal in 2012 for an innovation partnership on raw materials within Europe 2020 and under the Innovation Union flagship. The partnership will target non-energy, non-agricultural raw materials, meaning metallic ones, industrial and construction minerals, as well as natural rubber and wood. It has key components, and the key components is the technology-focused policy area, a non-technology focused policy area, and international cooperation. And why that? Because we want still to reflect along the whole value chain of raw materials, the three pillars approach which we have in the raw materials initiative. And you will find along this structure all three pillars. And I'll give you an example, like we have the technology-focused policy areas. We have exploration, extraction, processing, recycling, all the considerations which you also heard when William Neale was presenting the resource efficiency approach of Commissioner Potocnik. You will find substitution of rare earth, for example. Then we have the non-technology policy areas. Under the second pillar, we have identified that in the European Union, we need to improve the framework conditions for sustainable extraction. We need to have a good, solid legislative framework, but also streamlined procedures, so that extraction can take place in a sustainable manner, but also investors could have a predictable environment, a predictable economic environment, administrative environment. Then we have, as a non-technology policy pillar, all what is environmental legislation touching to mining. As William Neale said, there is sufficient legislation in place, but what is missing is better implementation, following up of issues which need still implementation and correct implementation by member states. And there are also, as he said, the issues of waste and end of waste. Definitely, we need to improve the framework condition of the existing legislation by better implementation. Then we have the international cooperation. Why international cooperation in the context of innovation partnership? Because this is the first pillar of the raw materials initiative. Because we need cooperation with our important partners in the world on research, for example, on raw materials, not only substitution, but also extraction and recyclability. So this is very good, but what are we doing about that? Well, we are working very, very, very actively. We have a high-level steering group to oversee the innovation partnership. It is co-chaired by Vice President Tajani, Commissioner Potocnik, and Commissioner Gigan-Quinn. It has a Sherpa group, and also it is working under 5 operational groups, each one dealing with the structure I explained before. One is dealing with the whole technological aspects of the value chain of raw materials, starting from exploration up to reuse and recycling. Number 2 is dealing with substitution of important raw materials. Number 3 is dealing with the non-technological area of sustainable supply of raw materials within European Union, and with knowledge base, which is an important part of having the right framework conditions for sustainable extraction in the European Union, how to improve the knowledge on raw materials within Europe. Number 4 is dealing with the non-technological part of environmental legislation which has an impact on extraction and on the whole value chain of raw materials, like recycling, for example. And number 5 is dealing with the international aspects. The objective of all that, simple: contribute to Europe 2020 targets of the EU industrial resource efficiency policy by ensuring the sustainable supply of raw materials to the European economy and society. Specific objectives: the reduction of import dependency via the sustainable improving supply conditions and providing resource efficiency, put Europe to the forefront in raw material sectors, and mitigating the negative environmental and social impacts. We have also very specific targets in the innovation partnership. This is still will be endorsed, as I will explain. It's not endorsed yet fully by the high-level group. It's work underway, but we have also targets, like, for example, I give as a target the idea for the working party 2, the substitutes by 2020 of 3 applications, substitutes of rare earth, how to improve mineral mining regulatory framework, a raw materials knowledge base with raw materials flows and trends, a network of research, education and training center, enhanced efficiency, proactive international cooperation strategy for EU, etc., etc. Now, main specific actions on Pillar 2, which is also operational group 3, and how to improve framework conditions within European Union, because we feel that this issue, while it is very well explained trade, why we need a sustainable, fair and sustainable access to raw materials from the outside world, it's always easy to explain. We are not the only ones in the European Commission to explain that. Our commissions of DG Trade have pursue the same objective. Or recycling and resource efficiency. DG Environment pursues that too. We are happy to cooperate. But Pillar 2, how to get sustainable extraction within Europe, this is an issue of DG Enterprise. This is why I have a separate slide of that, because this is an issue which we share, of course, the concerns with the colleagues in the Commission, but this is something which we are chef de file. So we consider that what is very important to get for the raw materials problematic is how to improve the framework condition within Europe. And in that, we need minerals policies. Now, after we had adopted the first communication on the raw materials initiative, many member states have started adopting minerals policies, a number of them. But this is not over yet. We need to have minerals policies, modern minerals policies in all member states. And these follows logically that we need to have appropriate land use planning policies, especially given the conflicting uses of land within the European Union. And in order to have that, we need to have simple and predictable authorization and permitting procedures. The environmental impact assessment is a part of that. And what will this lead us? This leads us to public acceptance. This will lead us to stakeholder engagement, predictability, sustainability, sustainable mining operations, will lead to stakeholder engagement. And without a stakeholder engagement, we would not be able to pursue and to fulfill our objective of a better, sustainable supply of raw materials within Europe. And an important part of this policy is a knowledge base. We need to use the same terms. We need to know, better know the mineral potential in the European Union. We need also, in order to know the mineral potential, we need streamlined, harmonizing public reporting of mineral resources. Forest-based issues, this is part of the slide. Why? Because the raw materials initiative was so successful. We started with the non-energy raw materials, but it was so successful that it was considered appropriate that we could enlarge our mandate also to cover rubber and wood-based industries. And we always stress that because the innovation partnership covers this wide scope. And you will find references to rubber, references to forest-based industries along the whole work of the innovation partnership. Some practical details. We finished the preparatory work of 2012. We are in the planning stage of 2013, and we are hyperactive because we are precisely in May. And in May, we have finished almost the preparation of the Innovation Partnership Strategic Implementation Plan. The Strategic Implementation Plan will present in practical terms the work for the Innovation Partnership in in the future. And the strategic implementation plan now, which will include actions, clear actions ahead, for the years ahead, is being under preparation. We have discussed that with the Sherpas, we have discussed that with the operational groups, we have discussed that with the Sherpas. We went back to the Sherpas to confirm the basic principles. We are now discussing with the Sherpas, more specifically, the actions which will be presented in the strategic implementation plan. And the objective is that the high-level group will endorse the strategic implementation plan on the 17th of July. Once this has been done, we will launch a call for commitments in September to stakeholders wishing to be involved in the implementation of the strategic implementation plan and carrying out specific actions. We also foresee to present officially to the European Parliament, to the Council, in a communication, the strategic implementation plan. This will be done hopefully by the end of this year, but this again should not be taken as a promise, because the procedure of preparation of strategic implementation plan has taken obviously time, and definitely the preparation of the communication will take more time than foreseen. And also it is important that we know the results of the call of commitments to stakeholders before we can present the communication. So the implementation stage will start 2014. It is not very far from now. It is very, very much linked to the discussions on Horizon 2020. There is a specific societal challenge on raw materials and climate change and resource efficiency number 5. And in this societal challenge, the innovation partnership on raw materials is also an important part. And this is why I welcome again and thank you for having given me the opportunity to present our work underway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Spiliopoulou. I think first of all that you take part in our event and for brilliant presentation. And also, in my visit in Chile, I understand that Vice President Tajani signed 5 agreements with Chile, and it's very important for Europe. Thanks for this. It's very good help for everybody. And about the raw material initiative, I am very in favor because I was a shadow reporter of Butikov reports in this. But next time I'll try to be a speaker to explain this brilliant initiative. Thank one more time. Thanks. And now Professor Votruba is here, and also Professor Gajdrzev is here. You continue with Mr. Johannes Drielsma, Deputy Director, Euromines. The EU within the context of global trends in raw material supply and demand, leading by example. Please, it's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Panayotov. Honourable members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be invited to contribute to this debate. I think it's excellent that we're having this hearing here in Parliament. And without any further ado, I will explain to you how we believe the mining industry has a very large contribution to make to this issue, and how we think EU has a responsibility to lead by example. A very quick word about who I represent. I represent Euromines. It's the European Association of Mining Industries. We have 18 national mining federations in our membership, 27 direct company members, some of them speaking today. Together we represent 350,000 jobs across Europe. But of course, as you all know, our raw materials are not sold at the night shop on the corner and then thrown away. Our raw materials go into all the other sectors of the EU economy, And so the indirect jobs that are supported by our industry are huge. What I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes or so is speak to you about the following things. The idea that resource efficiency, as we heard from Mr. Neale this morning, requires sustainable supply of raw materials. The fact that sustainable supply of raw materials requires mining. I'm going to, let's say, provide an alternative view to Mr. Neale this morning. I'm going to suggest to you that the European member states are actually rich in resources. I think we can forgive Mr. Neale for saying that it's not the case because it's so often heard. We're so often told by others that Europe is poor in natural resources. It's a massive misunderstanding, and we'll hear about that later today as well. And then finally, that the EU is actually a most sustainable supply source. If we're interested in responsible sourcing of raw materials, we should be looking in our own backyard. So, first of all, a word about resource efficiency. This graph shows you all the copper that has been produced by the mining industry globally since 1900. You'll see that there's been a large increase, and as we heard this morning, the increase will continue as other economies soak up more resources. Let's consider for a moment why we need to help the recycling industry to achieve resource efficiency. Copper, for example, can be used for many, many years in different products. In construction, in the transmission of electricity, it may be in use for 25 years or so. If we look back across this graph to 25 years ago to see, well, how much copper can we expect to be coming to the end of its useful life today, you will see that it's around 8.5 million tons should be coming to the end of its life this year globally. And then I want you to have a look at the total production today. It's about twice that. So what that means is if we recycle every gram of copper that we put into the economy 25 years ago, we will still need more to satisfy the demand of all those people around the world that would like to live a decent life. So that is why we need more than recycling. We absolutely need to encourage the recycling, maximize the recycling, but we will need more. Any circular economy will still need responsible sourcing, and that's what William Neale said this morning. Many people, I think of a circular economy as having no more waste, but also no more inputs. This will not be possible. What we should be aiming for in the EU is, of course, to increase that flux of material that's coming back into use after end of life. That's the reuse, that's the recycling, that's the circular part of the economy, and we absolutely do need to maximize that for all the reasons we heard this morning. But we will also need to increase the primary production, the inputs. The biggest challenge, perhaps, is to reduce as far as possible the flux that's leaving the economy, either into the environment by dispersive use or into waste disposal facilities, landfills. That's our common challenge, to reduce to absolute minimum amount, the waste. So if we accept now that the circular economy still needs inputs, then exploration and mining are where we need to go. Exploration and mining are the original natural source of all these raw materials. Every mineral or metal that is recycled was mined one day. I think another common misconception is the idea that our minerals and metals reserves are being depleted. It's not the case. The reserve is a very specific term. Reserve refers to ore in the ground that we can mine today with the technology of today at today's prices. In fact, according to some definitions, reserves are only those ore bodies that are permitted already for extraction. So it's a very small part of what's available. and what people may sometimes struggle to understand is that the mining industry is continually increasing the reserves. So consistently, year on year, the mining industry is actually adding more to mineral reserves than it's taking away. We heard about high prices. We heard about volatile prices. There's been a massive increase in prices in the last 10 years, and we as well in the mining industry do expect high prices to remain for the medium term. Not forever, but for the medium term while we see such growth in China, India, Brazil, etc. One of the best ways to ease pricing is to bring new material to the market. So safe, responsible transfer of material from the environment to the economy actually eases the scarcity on the market. It will help to ease the prices. It will help to stabilize the volatility of those prices. So mining in a responsible way, in a jurisdiction that is well governed, is actually a good thing for resource efficiency. And Europe is rich in resources. I think those of us who understand that clearly have a responsibility to spread the message far and wide. It is a common myth that Europe is poor in resources, and we are a responsible source. This is a map that I stole from the colleague at the Natural History Museum in London. He's running a project that's looking at the different mineral belts in Europe. The colours represent different mineral types, but you can see there is mineral potential all over Europe. These are not just interesting artifacts for a geologist. These are potentially viable deposits of raw materials that could be extracted. In the north, in Scandinavia, we have nickel, copper, iron, gold, copper, zinc, and rare earths. Again, this is not current production, because we know we have mines operating in Sweden and Norway and Finland. This is ore that's still in the ground. In the Balkans, gold, copper, lithium, boron, nickel. On the Iberian Peninsula, gold, copper, tin, tungsten. Tungsten, a very important raw material. I'm not sure it's on the critical list today, but we could expect it to be on the critical list one day soon. In Turkey, gold, copper, zinc, nickel, and trona, a very important industrial mineral. In Poland, copper and zinc. Today, Poland is one of the leading silver producers in the world. Even in Ireland, zinc, lead, gold, and the UK, gold, potassium, tin, tungsten. Very interesting deposits in all these areas of Europe that our members and other companies are actively looking at. What's interesting, you'll see there is some mineral potential identified in Germany and in France and Austria. But there's relatively little known about those. There's relatively little exploration activity in those countries. So altogether, this paints a picture of enormous potential in Europe, actually, to help ourselves to solve our own problems. And the EU mines are the most efficient in the world. We heard this morning about the historical focus on labour productivity and the fact that in the future we'll need to be much more productive and much better users, better producers of the raw materials. I'm happy to say the mining industry, while it may have also focused on labour productivity, it has always focused on material productivity. It's its business. So we have a long experience of that, and we have a contribution to the discussion about how we might improve our material productivity across the board. And I'm happy to say that the mines that are operating today in Europe under our legal regime, competing on a global market, are the most productive in the world. We're at the forefront of innovation in raw material supply. It's European technologies that are going into the mines all over the world, the newest mines, the automated mines. The breakthrough technologies are very often supplied by European companies. And we are meeting or exceeding the EU's very strict environmental and safety standards, which are not matched everywhere on the planet. So my key messages are that we strongly believe that Europe does have a viable resource base. The demand for raw materials will continue to increase, as we've heard, and Europe should maintain an enabling environment that provides for achievement of the highest standards in the industry here in Europe. And I want to add that we fully support the resource efficiency agenda of the EU. We believe we have an essential contribution to make. And taken together, the presentations of the European Commission this morning have given you the full picture. What we would like to see more of, what we are encouraging more, is the full picture being spoken about in each of the European Commission departments, in each of the DGs. There needs to be a raising up of the debate, if you like, to a recognition that resource efficiency means mining in Europe as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your optimistic speech, because now I'm encouraged that Europe has enough raw materials. Ms. Spiliopoulou mentioned sustainable mining. Now is the moment to know sustainable mining is myth or reality. This question and answer received from Roberto Villas-Boas, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Roberto, adelante.
There you go. Thank you, my friends and colleagues. It's always a pleasure to be talking to knowledgeable people about sustainable mining, a concept that some of us do not believe and some other of us do believe. So what is sustainability? No, not that one. Let's try. Which one should I tackle here? Page. The right, this one. Okay. That's sustainability mining. What does it mean? Cooperation. We have heard our previous speaker here talking about this strong cooperation between the mining companies, the communities involved, the stakeholders. So, if we consider all the available resources in the world, and let's call that R, a sustainable resource base, I'm talking about resource, the previous speaker talked about reserves. Reserves are part, that economical part of the resources that we are going to use in the mining. If from those resources, any resources, capital, human, mining, energy, whatever, we unite, so that's the symbol of union that we remember from our college years. If we unite those with hypotheses of sustainability, here represented by S, then we have a resource base that is sustainable. And those hypotheses of sustainability are those that the people, that the parliament discusses and imposes as acceptable to be sustainable. In the mining industry, this is very clear, is minimizing three specific pillars. Masses involved, water included, energy, process energy involved, water included, effluents, of course, water included in recycling, in recovery. And a fourth principle that's maximizing. Maximizing what? Social satisfaction. And social satisfaction do vary from region to region. For instance, if we are going to forbid meat in Japan, maybe this will not cause any major problem for the Japanese culture. Cow meat, I mean, not fish. If we are going to do the same in Argentina or Brazil, it will be a revolution because we eat meat every day. So, social acceptance depends very much on the culture you are in. So a sustainable ore body, then, is the alliance, the union of a sustainable resource with the agreement, the social agreements, the political issues related to the utilization of those same resources. You here in Europe, some years ago, you made a commitment that let's stop or minimize mining, and you did it. So let's use other resources. Now is the time, perhaps, of reconsidering that same issue that you put forward years ago as a public commitment, a societal commitment. So, as was explained in the previous presentation, Europe is rich in minerals. Indeed, it's very much rich in minerals. So, sustainable mining, indeed, is an issue in Europe. Here again, another map of the main mineral deposits of Europe that you find in Euromine web pages and very much discussed. Again, base metals, gold, iron, specialty minerals, rare metals, energy, ceramic, fertilizers, building materials, etc., are all scattered throughout Europe. So Europe is a rich continent for that matter. That's very interesting statistic here. The top 10 destinations for prospecting. Of course, Canada and US remains in the top, but Europe is receiving 4% of those prospecting money, drill results. Comparable to China, higher than Brazil and Russia, for instance, almost equivalent to Chile and Peru. So the interest in minerals in Europe is enormous, I should say. Fraser Institute has this policy potential index that measures the best available countries for investment in mining. And we are seeing here several European countries ranking very high in this potential index. Canada ranks, for instance, in 53, 53, something like that. So we are going to see here Finland, of course, Sweden, Ireland, and etc. So you do have a policy potential index very high as well. As I said before, the 4 pillars where a sustainable mine base: masses, overburden, tailing, water, energy, process energy, water included here in terms of producing or not that particular energy, and how much do you utilize in any kind of process to generate energy, the environmental impacts, water again, and social satisfaction, water again. So water is an issue regarding the public acceptance in the mining industry. And social satisfaction, as I mentioned, is the degree of societal acceptance of given policies, political agenda, or social agreement, disagreement in a given society. The UN, through the UNEC, is proposing general system of classification for resources and reserves. This type of system called UNFC is very interesting because all resources and reserves, and here's the case of reserves, for a given mining project, could be an oil project, could be a solar system project, could be a uranium thorium project, is classified according to 3 axes. So it's very Cartesian and very beautiful, this one. We have 3 axes that we classify reserves and resources. Which are those axes? The normal G-axis, the geological knowledge you have in that particular resource, from a simple identification of something towards the definition of a reserve based on the geological knowledge you have. So then you see here this G-axis. The other axis is the F-axis, so the project feasibility. From the very beginning of the idea, the concept, then a basic engineering project, then we get the project in itself, so it is feasible. And a third axis, that's the new one, is the so-called socio-economical viability. Socio-economical viability nowadays is the key issue for a given mining project, be or not be on the run. Geological knowledge is quite sophisticated. Engineering knowledge, feasibility, etc., is also quite sophisticated in the mining industry. But the socio-economic one, the public acceptance one, that is the one that's hindering. It is hindering world-class projects to come into play. And those issues of course, the issues varies according to each culture. There is a huge billion project in Peru, for instance, in gold, being hindered because of local anti-mining movements regarding land use. Maria here told us about the problem of land use that is a must in this context. Traditional against non-traditional. Cultural against non-cultural. Water again. So those issues are becoming more important regarding this discussion. One project according to this classification, and this classification is well accepted by the Crisco code, for instance, that's very much utilized for any mining company to get money from the Vancouver or the London or New York Stock Exchange or whatever. A running project is classified as 111. But sometimes this 111, because of those conflicts, may become 211, for instance, because the social-economical so-called viability has decreased. Here's again is another expansion of the same diagram, showing the link between this classification to the sustainability issues regarding the acceptance of mining as a sustainable business. It is a sustainable business, as we have seen, if we follow all the rules involved in that particular system. We have to remember that Agricola in the 1500s already called the attention when he wrote his famous and first book on mining. My dear fellow friends, be careful with the water you are sending to the neighbors, because then probably they are going to ask you some kind of attitude to perform on that particular water. So this was always a concern in the mining, engineering, art, or science. The use of water and the the planning of the land planning. Now, here comes what the former CEO of Rio Tinto said in London some 2 years ago. Resource extraction involves not only capital and technology, it also requires a focus on sustainable development, which means earning the consent of the local people or the license to operate. This is Rio Tinto CEO. Companies must follow leading practice on the environment, safety, and community engagement. With our experience, Rio Tinto can help meet this. Again, the same Albanese mentioned a very interesting thing that reports to our previous presentation here. He said, and this is regarding renewable and non-renewable resources or sustainable and non-sustainable resources. Because this renewable and non-renewable was a very interesting concept that Ricardo put forward centuries ago for that particular economical situation of Europe. Nowadays, I believe it's preferable to call sustainable or not sustainable resources, because there are a lot of renewables that disappeared. And from my concern, there is no just one single non-renewable that has disappeared. Paradox. So I believe it's better to call sustainable and non-sustainable resource. And this guy mentioned this. I would like to close this section by dispelling the myth that resources are finite. We always learn that resources are finite, right? Always. So I would like to disclose this section by dispelling the myth that resources are finite, a notion that some policymakers sometimes like to promote. Resources will only become finite if limits are placed on exploration, because a country has suddenly become less attractive for investment. So that's a very interesting question this Albanese, CEO of Rio Tinto, put forward. Because then, okay, so resources are there if we look for them. So, regarding the water problem, I mentioned this in Congo, already in Peru, but also in Bulgaria, we have some facts going on. So it's not providing transparent information about revenues from natural resources. People really didn't know how the resources are distributed and utilized. Okay, so here, I will leave with you in the presentation I have here. I'm not going to discuss this because I do not have time to go now. But there is all a logical formulation regarding on what I believe is a misconception that we are still utilizing today regarding the renewable and non-renewable. What I'm saying that renewable and non-renewable do not exist. No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, yes, exist renewable and not renewable resources. That's perfect. But the kind of hierarchy that today you give to those words do not anymore mean what we, in our world of today, are trying to reach in terms of sustainability, in terms of sustainable and non-sustainable resources. So there are some resources that are sustainable and others that are not. For instance, Central America. Central America is a rich region in gold. should we go to Central America? That's a small piece of land, beautiful rainforest area, very biodiverse, and extract that gold from there. Maybe not. Maybe that resource is a non-sustainable one and should be left as it is. Other parts of the world, this problem does not present. So I will leave the presentation with you with all the logical formulations regarding this presentation and finish my talk here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto, for a fantastic presentation. I think a lot of questions will be later because it's incredible. Yeah. Dear friends, now we stop here to go to the coffee break, and then we'll continue because it's a very, very interesting meeting start to be. Now let's go to relax for coffee break and continue. Excellent. Now you continue with very famous company Boliden, Sweden, represented by Dr. Hans Arebak, Exploration Director. Focus of sustainable raw material supply in Europe, Boliden. Mr. Arebak, we have a floor.
Well, thank you very much, and also thank you very much, the organizer here, for inviting Boliden to give a presentation here on this seminar. And as it said here, we will give a short presentation of our focus on sustainable raw material supply in Europe, both talking about a little bit about exploration, how we work with that, mining and processing and recycling. And I'm Hans Arebak, Exploration Director for Boliden. So Boliden actually started in early 1920s as a junior company, junior exploration company, with focus on exploration in northern Sweden. And in 1924, we discovered the famous Boliden deposit. The Boliden deposit is still one of the richest gold deposit mine in Europe. Mining started in 1926, and we're starting smelting, our smelter in Rönnskär in 1930. Since then, we have mined and found lots of different deposits, and we're still seeing lots of potential where we are active today. And we are producing metals for the modern society. So today, we are a European metal company with commitment to sustainable development. And our core competence here range from exploration, mining, processing, smelting, and metal recycling. We have 4 mining areas and we have 5 smelters. Mining areas 3 of them are in Sweden. If we start in the north here, we have a big open pit mining, mainly copper in Aitik. Then we have the Boliden area and Garpenberg, more close to Stockholm, which is a zinc mine. And then we have the biggest zinc mine in Europe, Tara, operation on Ireland. Smelters are located in Sweden, 2 of them, Rönnskär, Bergsö. 2 of them in Finland, Kokkola and Harjavalta, and 1 in Odda in western Norway. 2011, this is what we produced in metals. We are focused on base metals and precious metals. As you also see here from mines and smelters production, we don't provide our smelters completely by our mine productions. That's meaning that we have to import quite a lot of concentrates, mainly outside from Europe. About exploration, looking on the line here, the black line is our exploration expenditures. It's in million Swedish krona on the right axis here. And as you see here, we have increased our exploration activities. Last year, we spent approximately 350 million Swedish krona on exploration. and that corresponds to approximately 40 to 45 million euro. Our exploration activities are focused in Sweden, but we also do quite a lot in Ireland. We have more than 50 active projects at the moment. Exploration is a very important component of the group strategy here. And we also have a strong tradition and focus on innovative exploration methods. We have only been always, I would say, developing most of our own geophysical instruments. And we now have, for example, geophysical instruments where we know we can detect ore bodies at 1,000 meter depth. In Sweden, we are the biggest exploration company. We have approximately 107 exploration licenses. As well in Ireland, we are also the largest company holding 90 prospecting licenses. During the last 4 years, we have been a partner of a European research project called ProMine. Probably most of you know it here. There are several work packages within ProMine from 1 to 7. And we have mainly been partner of work package 1 and 2, but also a work package concerning processing. Work package 2 concern 3D dimensional modeling, and is the purpose is to be able to detect by modeling 3D geological features to detect deep ore bodies. This map has been shown before, and the main areas which we have focused on in this 3D modeling in the ProMine projects are up in Skellefteå district and Pyhäsalmi here in Finland and Sweden and Finland, here in Poland, Copper-Schiefer belt, Hellenic belt in Greece, and Iberian belt in Portugal and Spain. About mining, we have a central department which work with mining technology and we always try to be more efficient concerning mining, because that's our competitors. At the moment, we are doing a program called Mine Automation Program, where the vision is to have a continuous process that runs 24/7. With no operator at the production phase. And this is to improve phase utilizations, it's to increase productivity, and it's also because of safety. Regarding mineral processing, we also have this central department working with mineral processing to recover more minerals, and also to be this resource efficient. Flotation is the main mineral processing that we are recovering metals with, and we are always trying to improve these flotation methods. But we are also working with leaching, and a new project here that we recently started, we call it From Anti-Money to Anti-Money. And the background from this is that we have a few great deposits which contain rather high values of antimony and arsenic. And when you have antimony in the copper concentrate, it's not good. And this research or this innovative research project is to try to leach antimony from the copper concentrates, and by that the copper concentrates could be sellable, and also we can extract antimony, which is a market for antimony. Concerning recycling, we have, as I said here, we have our smelters, and quite recently we have invested lots of money in building or increasing our capacity of taking e-scrap. And in Rönnskär in northern Sweden, it's actually at the moment the biggest e-scrap recycling facility in the world. This was commissioned last summer, 1st of June 2012, and By commissioning this, we have increased metal production of copper by 14,000 tons, silver 32 tons, and gold 2 tons. Quite recently, in Sweden, there has been a strategic research and innovative agenda for Swedish mining and metal producing industry. We are a partner of this strategic agenda, together with some other major metal companies. This is run by universities, but there are several industrial companies which are partners to this agenda. This agenda are based on 7 agendas, and areas included in this agenda involve deep innovative exploration, it involve mining, mineral processing, recycling, reclamation and environmental performance, active workplaces, and gender equal mining. So by that, I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hans Orebek, for this presentation, and thank you very much. And then we continue with the next speaker, Herman Votruba. Professor Herman Votruba will talk about mineral processes and new technologies applications. Please.
Thank you very much for the invitation to present some thoughts and details of the area of mineral processing. We all know that the quality of mineral resources in general is degrading. We have to mine deposits with lower grades. We have to mine deposits with more contaminations of unwanted elements, and this results, especially the lower grade, results that we have to mine or to extract and to process more material for the same amount of product. We have to move more mass and deposit more tailings. We have to use more energy, and we have to use more water. Energy consumption is rising all over the world, and most of this energy is produced by fossil fuels, some by uranium, and still a small part by renewable energy. Mining and mineral processing consumes a lot of energy. It is estimated that only for milling minerals, about 4% of the whole energy consumption is used worldwide. And energy is one of the main, if not the main, cost factors for mineral processing. Next issue, also already mentioned by Professor Villas-Boas, is that we need a lot of water for mineral processing, but we are in competition with other water users, especially agriculture. And as the mines move forward in areas where water is a problem, like, for example, arid areas or desert areas or permafrost areas, where the water is just freezing, we have to see how we solve that water problem. And also, water, when we use it, it is more or less contaminated. We have to recycle it within the process. But if we discharge it, we have to clean it. So water supply, water handling, water cleaning are also major cost factors for mineral processing. Next issue is masses. I already told you that we have to move to process more and more masses for the same amount of product. The old rich deposits, there's still some, but most of them are gone. So we go from high grade to ever low grades. And the usable mass percentage can be very different. For example, in construction materials, we can use nearly everything. In iron ore, there are deposits where we can also use 90% of the mass. But if we talk about gold, we have deposits which have about something like 1 gram per ton of gold. So we have to we have a relation of 1 to 1 million, nearly, of the mass we can use and the mass we have to deposit later. Energy is always the question where you set your limit of your system. Mineral processing is only one part of the process chain. We have a long process chain which goes from mining over transport, mineral processing, tailings deposition, consumables, which also use energy, like producing iron balls, steel balls for milling, has also an impact on energy consumption. And at the end, smelting or refining. So all that consumes more or less energy. And these, the single parts of this chain are linked. Mineral processing is only one part of the chain, but one very important one. For what do we need energy in mineral processing? Mainly for reducing the size of our rocks to liberate the minerals. We can only separate them if they are free. So we have to grind the material, to break the material, to set the minerals free, to liberate them, then we can separate them. Grinding is using most energy. Concentration is also using energy. Materials handling like transport, conveying, pumping needs energy, and other things like dewatering or even drying needs energy. But grinding consumes up to 80% of the energy which is used in mineral processing. You see, this is really a major cost factor. This shows you a little bit where the energy is used. And this is the total mining energy, and this is the total processing energy. You see, processing needs much more energy than mining. This is for the open pit copper mine. By the way, we analyzed production costs and energy consumption of several copper mines all over the world. And IT mine Boliden is among the very, very best. So the system is really good. I'm surprised how little energy they use for the production and results in a very low production cost. So they're definitely under the few percent world leaders there in technology. So what can we do to reduce our energy consumption in mineral processing applies as well for water consumption. First is benchmarking. We have to see where we are. There are good examples, there are bad examples. We have to inform about best available technologies. We have to interchange experiences. We have to cooperate between minerals industry, research institutions, universities, and equipment manufacturers to always improve the processes. And we have also to incorporate new approaches and technologies in the engineering education of our engineers at the universities. We can go with small steps and make some incremental improvements, like making the machines always bigger. This helps also in reducing specific energy costs. We have to improve process control, online analysis. We have to improve automation, reduce overgrinding. We have to grind only so fine as is needed and not grind too fine. We have to optimize the mineral handling and so on. But we can also make bigger steps. And one important thing, which is a new technology, is to reduce the waste in the feed for the processing plant. How can we do that? There are new technologies like sensor sorting. So by different physical sensors, we can detect if a piece of rock is really containing the desired metal or is a waste. And we separate it out before we grind it. And this saves us a lot of energy and also water. These technologies are new. Let's say in the way that they can be used in the mining is relatively new. And European companies are the ones in the world who are leaders in that new technology. Just one example, if we remove 1 ton of waste from a feed stream which goes into a processing plant, we need about 1 kilowatt hour. If we would grind this coarse material to the size flotation needs, and we would apply flotation, we would need about 15 and even more kilowatt hours per ton. So you see the difference. 1 kilowatt hour per ton to separate it instead of 15 or even 20 when we throw it into the plant. The other thing is that we have to improve the milling. There are several new milling technologies like high pressure roller grinding or like vertical roller mills or like new ultrafine grinding mills like the ISA mill. And they are all produced in Europe. All companies who produce these, there are some copies from China, I have to say. But the problem is that the patent is running out, and then, oh, it's not a problem, but more companies will start producing these things. But at the moment, all that technology is produced here, developed here, produced here, and sold everywhere in the world. We have also to improve coarse particle recovery, because sometimes you only grind it so fine because you have to float it, and this has a maximum particle size. But there are also processes where we can float coarser particles, like flash flotation. There's a company, Outotec, from Finland, for example, which is leader in that technology. We can also use gravity concentration before we use flotation. The other thing is we can use near-to-phase beneficiation. That means we bring part of the processing plant into the mine, for example, underground. We have one project with Kali und Salz, is a large potassium company in Germany, where the idea is to leave big part of the waste underground in the mine. We don't hoist it up to the surface. In that way, we avoid that we have to deposit it later, and we can leave it underground, backfill it, and this saves us energy, this saves us deposition space, and we have a pre-concentration from underground already. The waste is removed, that makes the material which comes out is richer. So this also has a positive effect on production and also on the processing cost per unit of product. Because for the mill, it's no different if the material has 10% potassium or 15. The cost is the same, more or less. So it's better to remove it underground and leave it underground. Water is used for many things in mineral processing, for washing, for scrubbing, for wet grinding, for wet gravity concentration, for flotation, for leaching. It's a medium for transport. It's used for dust precipitation, for cooling. We need it for many purposes. And we have already heard that water is a problem, increasing problem. Availability of water is a problem. Cost for water supply and water cleaning is a problem. So we have to reduce the amount of water we use in mineral processing. Usually you need 3 to 4 tons of water to process 1 ton of mineral. So imagine a mine which has 100,000 tons throughput a day needs, in fact, 300,000, 400,000 cubic meter of water, processed water every day. So we try to recycle this as good as we can, but we always also need fresh water. We also have, if the water is contaminated, for example, with ions, we have to clean it before we discharge it. So what can we do? We can also try to process it in a dry way. Sensor-based sorting is one possibility, but we can also use, for example, dry gravity concentration, like dry jigging or dry fluid bed separation. And again, in that case, European companies are the ones who make these machines and sell them worldwide. So what I already said, sensor sorting can be one option. Gravity concentration, all processes which work dry, avoid the use of water. I have said already that we have to recycle our water, but we have to try to use it without reagents. So instead of flotation, we can probably apply wet gravity concentration as a first step to make a pre-concentrate and then do the regrinding and use flotation. We have to use, if possible, non-toxic and non-dangerous reagents, on biodegradable reagents. There's a lot of research going on also in the companies who produce this kind of reagents. We have also to develop alternative processes, like, for example, bacterial depressing of pyrite without the using of chemical depressants. We have to still research on the long-time behavior of these reagents if they are at the end deposited and go into the tailings pond. Some regions we don't even know how they behave. There's a lot going on in terms of in situ processes, not to remove the material from the ground, but leave it there and do a leaching in the ground. This works fine with salt and potassium, but in metal mining, this can be a considerable risk for water, for underground water, and it still has to be studied. What I told you, masses is a big problem. We have to move a lot of material. If we have underground mining, then we have a good relation usually between our ore and our waste. But if you do surface mining, it depends how the shape of the deposit is and how much overburden it's got. We move up to 10 times more waste than ore. That means for every ton of ore we mine, we have to mine 10 tons of waste. For example, in Germany, we have these huge lignite mines. They have about this factor, 1 to 10 to 1 to 15 even. So for 1 ton of lignite, we have to mine 10 tons up to 15 tons of waste. So if we have heard that every single person consumes about 16 tons of materials every year in Europe, we have to see that if you buy one gold ring with 5 grams, this is not only 5 grams you use, because for the production of this gold ring, you had to mine probably 10 tons of ore and 10 tons per ton of ore of waste rock. So you have to multiply that. So this is much more than you think. We can also try to reduce this mass movement. We can do selective mining, new mining types of mining processes. There's a transition from open pit to underground mining. You see that also in the big copper mines in Chile, for example, they go underground. We have to, what I already told you, to eliminate the waste before we mill it. We try to concentrate as coarse as possible. But the interesting thing is that all these three, let's say, problems, energy, water, and masses, they belong together, they're interrelated. So if we reduce masses, we reduce energy consumption, we reduce water consumption, and we reduce environmental impacts. And at the end, which is the most important thing for the mining companies also, we reduce costs. So this is a typical win-win situation. By optimizing these processes, by new technology, by improved processes, on the one hand, we save environmental or reduce environmental impacts, but we also reduce our costs, and this is at the end the driver. So a summary and conclusions. The consumption of mineral resources, we all know it will increase in future. The mineral industry is a major consumer of energy and water. Costs for both energy and water increase while the availability decreases. The situation will be worse in future. Energy is the major cost factor for mineral processing. Increasing energy costs lead also to increasing commodity prices. Reduction of moved and treated masses reduce energy and water consumption. Mineral extraction, mineral processing, and mineral refinement, smelting, etc., have to be regarded as one process chain, where energy, water, and mass balances are interconnected. So we must not look at one part only. So we have to look at the whole process chain. It makes no sense to improve one part, and with that improvement, we have a problem in the next part. So also the new European programs, they have also this wide scope to see the whole thing, from the mining over the processing to the smelting to the recycling, the whole process chain, and not only looking at one step of the process. And what I told you already, European equipment manufacturing companies are world leader in major and innovative fields of mineral processing, like fine and ultra-fine grinding, like sensor-based sorting, and also in dry separation processes. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much. And then I think that we continue to the next presentation. Dr. Renzo Tomellini from DG Research and Innovation, and Dr. Tomellini is head of unit, operational unit materials. Please.
It's complicated. If it works. If not, you're gonna do it from there.
Everything is complicated.
All right.
So, thank you for this show. That's nice. I didn't expect this show. Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the invitation. I do not show slides because after William Neale and Maria Spiliopoulou, I wanted to see what they would have said. So I would like to concentrate only on a couple of issues. To reply to a question, okay, but research, what does research do? Framework Program 7, Horizon 2020, do they play a role in this or not? And then announce our next event. It is an international conference end of this month, 29th, 20th, 30th of May, here around the corner in Brussels. So what does research do? We have, for the moment, the instrument is Framework Program 7. And the Framework Program 7, we have already allocated more than 100 million euros to support research in this field. How much we will reach, it depends what you put in the pot, how you calculate. If, like Mr. Dr. Wotruba was mentioning, we put water processing, then the figures become very big. I don't know how much we will reach the 200 million, we will not, or depends how specific you want to be, selective you want to be in calculating. Where did we put money for research for the moment? But in five fields. Mining, mapping, mining, manufacturing, recycling, and substitution. Starting with mapping, there is a compatibility of maps. I guess, it's not my field, but I guess that countries of different culture have different kind of mapping, a different level of information that is collected, and compatibility of map is not there. We can use now satellites to map. We can use satellites to map on land. We can use satellites to map in the sea and in the Arctic zones and so on. So mapping is a topic where we are working at, and we are supporting progress. After mapping, mining. Mining, we have heard from the previous presentation, that is there is the architecture of the mining. There's mining as a technology. There are the machines for mining. So these are already two different issues. Particularly if we heard, and Professor Villas-Boas has been very encouraging, reminded that in Europe we have so many reserves, so much mineral to exploit. Splendid, but maybe it's deeper, or maybe it's in urbanized zones. So automatically you see that you need a discussion with the population. You need a societal dialogue to be sure that people, when they see a mine in their garden, they don't get upset. So consensus is essential. But if it's deeper, maybe you don't want to send people down. You want to send machines. So it's robots. So this is automatically the robotic, and this is automatically other kinds of mining that the technology that should be developed. But if you do mapping in the seabed, but then it could be mapping also in unconventional zones, can be in Arctic zones, can be in water. We are not yet able to get fresh water out of the sea. By definition, water goes down, so we have wells in the sea, and we are not yet able to use these wells for getting fresh water. So technology can be developed also in these if we want to think in the future to exploit also the potential of the seabed in this kind of gaining of minerals. Manufacturing. We know that in case, for instance, I take just an example that I know, the magnets, when manufacturing magnets, 30% of the production breaks. This, of course, automatically we see how much we can work at, and we can improve in manufacturing. Recycling. Recycling, William Neale at the beginning was mentioning eco-design. We know very well that when we try to recycle, and we have not conceived the product at the beginning for recycle, it costs too much energy. There are so many inconveniences. So the product should be conceived for being recycled, so the eco-design, dismantled, some parts can be reused, like a rotor or a stator you can reuse directly, other parts, okay, you want to recycle, and you need to reconceive the products, also reconceive the use of the product. Also there, a societal innovation element is present. And maybe we need also to reconsider some business models of industries. I take as an example, okay, Umicore will now show us, I guess, Hoboken and something. we will be exposed to your plant, information about your plant. But when a mobile phone is sold, it's sold. It belongs to the person who bought the mobile phone. If you buy an engine for aircraft, you will never buy it. General Electric and Rolls-Royce, they will never sell it to you. They will give it to you. It will be leased. And then they will ensure the maintenance. But the property will be their property. So at the end of life, it goes back. So the business model of an engine, of an aircraft, it is not selling. It's a different business model. So you already have an element of this circular economy that William Neale was mentioning at the beginning. From the other side, the responsibility and the consideration about the raw materials. If we developed lead-emitting diodes and we base everything on indium and we discover that we don't have so much indium like you would like to have for developing all the lead industry, then it is questionable if this kind of investment, this kind of development is the right one that we want to support. So also business models could be enlarged, and we can discuss with industries about the possibility of enlarging business models, also because too many times in the past profit has been privatized and then charges for in case of the environment or other kind of charges have been collectivized, paid by the society. So and this is not probably no longer a model that we can pursue in a shortage of cash period. Last but not least, I was mentioned these five, so mapping, mining, manufacturing, recycling, substitution. Substitution, which is the effect of developing technologies for some cases, for some materials, for some applications, and first of all, reduce the use of difficult to obtain metals, or in some cases, eliminate and use other solutions. For instance, nanotechnology allows us, working on a nanostructure of a material, to obtain the same properties that in the past you could obtain with alloy elements, alloy metals. Let's think very simply at steel, high alloy steels. There's been a moment where steel and new alloy elements have been tested to obtain new properties and better performing in service performing steel grades. But then this was a problem in recycling, because in the secondary metallurgy you find back the elements that you got that you put in at the beginning, and so you spend more money in the secondary metallurgy at the moment of the recycling. So you see again the business model, and you see again an integrated approach how it play a role. And in that case, the use of nanostructuring in steel, like monocrystal steels or whatever, played a role for achieving the properties that were before obtained with the use and with the addition of other elements. So in our portfolio, for the moment, we have been addressing these different parts. I have here some titles just in my portfolio that I can give you to mention so that you have an idea. I'm a head of using materials, so I work materials by definition. So in my portfolio, I have projects like substitution of materials or components using green nanotechnology, novel materials for replacement of strategic or scarce raw materials of the platinum group metals and rare earths, innovative recycling technology of key metals in high-tech applications, develop new materials for the substitution of critical metals, substitution of critical raw materials, networking, this is a networking action, and European Intelligence Network on the supply of raw materials. So these are examples of titles of projects that are in my portfolio. Maria Spiliopoulou was mentioning international cooperation. International cooperation is important when we want to accelerate progress. because it allows to have a larger critical mass and to speed up, to pool knowledge, speed up, and do things more rapidly. It's important that the rules of the game are clear to avoid to enter into possible market issues and have some litigations. But if we are wise enough into setting the right frame conditions, international cooperation is very powerful, and in particular for us has been powerful and seeked with the United States and with Japan. I say in particular with them, it's obvious, we are economies that are industrialized and dependent upon import. Maybe in case of rare earth, United States, when the Mountain Pass mine will be working, they will not be importing any rare earth any longer. I doubt even that they will export dysprosium in the future. But again, we have to see in the future what comes. But for the moment, Japan, United States, and Europe share this kind of situation. Large industrialized economies and import dependent. So, Maria was mentioning the Transatlantic Economic Council. I can mention also the Energy Council, because there is a strange symmetry between what we say non-energy raw materials and what the United States say energy raw materials. Because we say non-energy, they say energy, they say, but anyway, this is the beauty of communication, and all the bilateral exchange that we have with the different regions. So what I wanted to mention is that we will have exactly in 10 days, 29th and 30th of May, an event here in Brussels. So you are very welcome to register, it's for free. And this is a trilateral dialogue, United States, Japan, and Europe, where we make the point exactly on these issues, and we concentrate on research. We are research people, so we address with this research, of course, as our core business. We started. Actually, I had the pleasure myself to be the initiator of this initiative. But we started the trilateral, but now we have participants also from other countries. We have Canada, we have Australia, we have Brazil this year for the first time, we have South Africa, and so on. Other countries want to participate, and so to join this kind of event. So I said, you find in our blog EU materials in the blog. You find immediately, or you contact me, and I send you the program. And we will have, by the way, a visit to Umicore, thanks to your kind hospitality. It's interesting to see that these kind of events have also visibility, where research plays a role that is then of interest also on other tables, like the effect of trade and industrial policy. For the Commission side and with the Parliament, of course, the key issue is to have synergy in our effort and in our operation. I think Genghis Khan was saying to his children that one arrow is very fragile. Where all the arrows are together, you don't break them. So I think this example is valid for everybody of us. And in particular, in the case of the Commission, we work, I think, very well, because we have an inter-service group chaired by DG Enterprise, because by nature is Vice President Tajani who has initiated this. Actually, Vice President Verheugen in 2008 was the history. And all the services of the Commission were concerned, so Enterprise, DG Trade, Joint Research Center, Research and Innovation, and so on, participate, and we work together in a synergic approach. And so, of course, working with the Parliament and with the Member States is extremely precious. We have this kind of research projects, and we have also some accompanying measures bringing together the different stakeholders and different actors, like, for instance, a accompanying measure that is the CRM InnoNet. This is Critical Raw Material Innovation Network towards an integrated community driving innovation in the field of critical raw material substitution for the benefit of EU industry. So this kind of thing. So we subvention, as always, research, but also getting together, also creating the structure, also bringing the stakeholders together, so that this kind of cooperation continues also outside, beyond what are the actions that are financed directly from the portfolio or the Framework Program 7. Last point, what happens in the future? In the future, happens that Framework Program 7 will come to an end of the year. We will have Framework Program 8 that we call Horizon 2020, because different spirit, different kind of framework program. So this topic will be in. So the messages will be in, and then the classical question with how much money? And then I can tell you that will be with million euros. We don't know the money. We don't know the money because you know that the Commission has presented the proposal, has presented 80 billion euros. You know that the Council has not been so directly enthusiastic with the question of money that has been presented by the proposal. We know that the Parliament has sustained and supported more the Commission proposal, and so I cannot tell you any figure about the future because for me exists only what the Commission has proposed, and this is the only thing that exists. And then will exist the final decision by the budgetary authorities, which are the Parliament and the Council. But what it is, and what is a simple and legitimate prophesy, is that yes, this kind of support, there will be dedicated money for research and innovation in this field. And then how much will be this? How will be managed and so on? This is all still a bit too early, but I'm confident for the next event that you may want to organize, we can give eventually, take the full picture with the due detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information, and also thank you for a new way of entering the podium. It was very exciting. Perhaps innovative.
I will take the other way out.
Perhaps Professor Hanumanta Rao will do a more conventional entrance at the podium. Please.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you later.
Just for a second, for a while, before the welcome to Mr. Robert Pollard from U.S. Mission to the European Union, and welcome also to Mr. Greg McLachlan, Minister of Deputy Head of Mission, Australia. Okay. Yes. We also have presentations. We will see later.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, I first of all thank Professor Vladko and for giving me this opportunity to speak today before the distinguished audience, and I am really pleased. Thank you very much for that. I mean, initially when I thought I presented a title, Molecular Modeling, Design and Development of Mineral-Specific Reagents. Then when I saw that the other speakers' titles, then I thought, no, I have to make it more general. So then I tried to make it more general, but still it turns out to be more scientific what we are doing at Luleå, or basically what I am doing at Luleå. And I'm sorry for that, but it is basically what I'm going to present is what we are doing at Luleå in mineral processing. I'm basically a physical chemist, and I have been working in mineral processing mostly related to chemistry problems, surface chemistry, which is basically the flotation. And also other unit process, also if there is any problem related to surface chemistry, we try to involve and try to work on that. So it's the title is Revisiting Mineral Processing, a Few Priority and Direction. These are the priorities what we consider are at what we are doing at Luleå. I have now 3 PhD students, 1 postdoc only at the moment. So that these are the works we are doing there. So, well, sulfide minerals, they are very most important. All the value minerals, we are associated with the sulfides, copper, lead, zinc and all. And they are very most important and most diverse and rich in terms of physical, chemical, and structural properties. And the redox chemistry of the sulfide minerals is very complex. By the electronic structure and structural properties, they are very, very different or complex. And why the complex? It all stems from different oxidation states, colloid number, symmetry, and all these kind of properties. So, and these minerals are very important both from the industrial point of view and also fundamental point of view. And we have to know the redox chemistry of these minerals in aqueous medium. And do we have any general theory of a redox to predict the redox chemistry of sulfides in aqueous medium, even though we have been doing research for several decades? No, there is no general theory exist. And we are working on it trying to do the redox chemistry, a theory of predicting the redox chemistry of sulfides in aqueous media. That's very important for mineral processing as well as environmental purposes. So, okay, let us look briefly what work has been done during all these decades. And during the past century, the sulfide minerals in aqueous media basically with the wet chemistry observations and application of some equilibrium thermodynamics. And then the mid-20th century adopting some concepts of colloid surface chemistry and electrochemistry principles. And then recently some surface chemistry has been, surface physics have been introduced, but they are not very much involved in research activity with the sulfide minerals. But what all the kind of experiments have been studied on a pure, single, clean crystal surfaces used under spectroscopic and microscopic observations under very high vacuum, ultra vacuum conditions, and also X-ray irradiation beams. But we know that how the minerals are. They are very, very defective, especially when we are grinding the minerals to liberate the minerals, and also for flotation, very fine particles. All the mineral surfaces are very defective. And the defect is a great problem in the sense they are the one which dictate the reactivity of the minerals in aqueous media. But all our experiments are very unclean, clean surfaces under vacuum, X-ray, so many kind of techniques. But the reality is entirely different. And moreover, you take a sulfide mineral, put it in water and take it out. And then you see entire surface chemistry is changed. So what I'm trying to say is there are gaps between surface science of the idealistic surfaces, the indirect equilibrium and 2D character of the present basic concept, and that needs to know what is exactly happening at the real mineral solution interface at the molecular level and in real time. Here the 2D character, it is a very primitive approximation, and still we are continuing that approximation. What I mean by 2D character? We consider the mineral surface as a basic set of adsorption site, and those set of adsorption sites do not interact with the bulk of the crystal and do not change after adsorption. It's very primitive. For a thorough understanding, we have to have an interconnection between material properties and the adhering or closed surface sites. All we have to have an interconnection. So that's what lot of studies, we cannot immense, but now let us look into what kind of mechanisms we have been proposing during the years. We have in the case of oxide, we have a chemical mechanism, which means the charge transfer between the solid to the adsorbate and between the adsorbates and from the adsorbate to solids. But this kind of mechanism, it cannot explain many of the experimental facts of spectroscopy even, and also the oxidation film growth on the surfaces. So it cannot explain. And then the alternative is the electrochemical mechanism. And this electrochemical, which means that it implies that this anodic, cathodic, semi-reactions of some redox reaction, they are spatially separated. But anyhow, manipulating this redox potential have been very much used in the sulfide flotation for the adsorption of the xanthate collectors. But wider applicability has not been explored that. What I mean by wider applicability, if your surfaces are very defective, it can start the redox or surface, it will start there at that defect site, or it's or this redox activated at that defect site, and it will enlarge from there, and it will not start a new. So this kind of a situation can happen if the surfaces are very defective. And in such a case, we can think of a pseudo-electrochemical mechanism. It can happen. And we have to study the pathways of the pseudo-electrochemical mechanism in all its totality. This, we feel it. Let us say, when we see many people are doing the bioleaching using the bacteria. When you see the bacteria on the mineral surface, where it is colonizing. If you look all these scanning electron microscope in the literature, you will find the colonization of the bacteria only at the defect sites on the mineral surfaces, cracks, corners and all that. So they call, what does that mean? So which means the bacteria is trying to recognize the redox active sites, how it is doing, and we have to understand that. Then perhaps we may be able to use our inorganic, organic solutes, which can be redox active, and thereby we can control the surface properties of the mineral. And that's what we are looking at it. And as I mentioned to you, that there is no predictive general theory of aqueous redox activity of our sulfide minerals. In order to have that kind of a theory, what we are supposed to do? So I just mentioned some questions here, and we need to have an answers for all these questions. Then it is easy to develop a predictive model of the sulfide minerals. It's very important even for an environmental point of view. And I just mentioned, do the surface having intrinsic oxidizing and reducing sites? I mean, how to determine? So I put it how we are determining and all that. So these are several questions, and I have been already advised to keep it only in 15 minutes. So these are all questions, and if we get an answers all these questions, then certainly we are going to work out a general theory to predict the redox catalytic activity of the sulfide minerals. Now, as I mentioned, we have a surface as a defect, and defects can be several: stabs, kinks, edges, vacancies. These defect problems are very well studied in gas catalysis and all that. But we never bothered about in flotation and all, and even geochemical systems also. But now only people are looking at these aspects. And then there is recently, because people are working, everybody is working with nanoparticles. And then when they see that when you are decreasing the particle size below a certain threshold size, then the surfaces of those particles became entirely different than the bulk of the mineral. Which means that the stoichrometry on the surface became different than the inside the bulk, and even the distance between the atoms adjacent atoms, it became entirely different. So when the fine particle or submicron particle, the surface, what we are dealing is entirely different. And as mentioned, here we find particle flotation. Now we are losing valuable minerals, nearly 10 to 20% even, because we are unable to float in fine particle sizes or separate the fine when it is accumulated in very, very fine particle. Of course, I don't want to go through the traditional reasons of the flotation, why you are unable to collect the fine particles and don't have the mass, you don't have a sufficient mass to have momentum and to have a collision between the particle and the gas air bubble and all that. But it's not only that. The particle size surface is entirely different than the original starting part when we are decreasing particle size. So I say we have to study with decreasing the particle size, and it's a reactivity, step by step, thorough and understanding we have to study. And of course, when you are decreasing the particle size, redox potential of the sulfide decreases along with the absorption capacity. Okay, in that case, we can use more easily oxidizable surfactant to adsorb on the mineral surface, because we know the way junctates are adsorbed is through oxidation and all. And how you can make it more easily oxidable? Simply use long alkyl chain length. Why to use only ethyl junctate? It's only 2 carbon atoms, or propyl junctate. Why not we use a long alkyl chain? In such a case, I believe that we can stick these collectors to the fine particles, basically. But we want to look at it. Now, it's an entire literature, and this is from the environment people. They suddenly found that hydrogen peroxide is generated by the pyrite, you see. And pyrite is able to put pyrite in a water aqueous media, and then they see the hydrogen peroxide in water. What it is able to do, this pyrite is catalytically so active, it's breaking down the water molecule to OH free radical. And if you have a OH free radical, then you have hydrogen peroxide. So they have determined quantitatively how much hydrogen peroxide is forming. Why they are doing? Because we know the acid mine drainage and all that. But mineral processing people, we have never looked at it, the hydrogen peroxide, and what it will affect in our flotation. When we have hydrogen peroxide, we are oxidizing the entire surfaces. And maybe there we are losing the selectivity, grade, and all that. So we have to study these. What I mentioned here is we have to build correlation between percentage of pyrite in the concentrate, grinding condition, and concentration of OH, and study control the formation of these species. Now, as I mentioned, one of my students is doing, we ourselves has done, trying to measure the hydrogen peroxide in pyrite at a different pH and different conditioning in wet and dry ground. And so yes, its hydrogen peroxide is forming in the with the sulfide mineral surfaces. And yeah, okay, it is the mixture of the sulfide minerals, and we have measured the, how much time am I?
I think it's 1 minute, sorry.
Okay. Okay, well, this is, I put it here, so how to do it in situ, but well, we have mentioned a lot about the water already, and we have to recycle the processed water, and scientifically how you can process that, what are the species in the processed water, and how they will influence your flotation. You have to investigate the effect of the major species, minor species, and independently and in combination, and see their effects in the flotation. So, and of course, this I don't want to, this is what we are working on, the design of a mineral structure specific rate. I don't want to go through here. The idea is through biomineralization, how the biological molecule are able to crystallize a perfect mineral phase. I'm talking about the teeth, bones, and all that, and how they are able to control specific direction, and how they are able to do it. And there is an understanding. Based on that, we can design a molecule which can identify the mineral surface, which means only use 2 functional groups which are geometrically spaced, equivalent to the adsorption sites on mineral surfaces, which are electrostatic matching, and also stereochemical complementarity. Then you will, and we have done, we have synthesized we have synthesized the molecules with the two functional groups. All these years, our collectors are only with single functional group. We have synthesized two functional groups with varying geometrical distances. And so far, we don't have yet an industrial solution, a separation between apatite and calcite. And now you can see out of the 4 molecules, only 1 molecule want to float apatite. What is the great difference in those 4 molecules? And here it is, only 1 molecule want to float the calcite. So we are going to have a tailor-made reagents for our mineral surfaces. We are going to have entirely new class of surface active agent. This you can see only 1 molecule at that. And this is related to sulfide minerals. Also, we are synthesizing 2 functional group reagents. And okay, I don't want to, sorry, I took most time, and thank you. That's all what I want to convey message. But it's all what we are doing at Luleå. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I give the floor to Mr. Jan Tugat, who is Senior Manager, EU Government Affairs, EMICOR. Please. Yeah, thank you.
So, good morning. My name is Jan Tugat from EMICOR. I thank the organizers to schedule me rather late in the morning, so because then a lot of things has already been said. And the nice thing is that a lot of things that has been said already perfectly fits with the philosophy of our company in resource efficiency and supply. So that means that I can stick to the major messages and not to go too much in detail in what I would like to say. So if you look at our today's technological world, we need a lot of materials. And not only a lot in volume, but also a lot in different elements. So today's complexity of technical solutions needs a lot of elements which has previously not been used in the same extent as we use today. That means that in fact, there are some pictures or some figures here in this presentation. I will not go into that, but it means that a lot of these technical materials come together into our technosphere in our world today, and this is a source of minerals, let's say, a source of materials that we would call the urban mine. And that's a way to look at it. Waste is not a waste to landfill or to incinerate, as Mr. Neale said this morning. We should go away from that and really consider this as a source of materials. We have to look at the materials from a total view and not just from a supply view or a waste view, but materials are in a cycle. And this has been pictured already this morning. We have to look at it as a real cycle, and that means that during this cycle we have to think on each individual step on resource efficiency. That means already from the design phase, can we do more with less? So can we, for instance, going from micro-sized particles to nano-sized particles with the same performance? If we are looking to batteries, for instance, can we do more performance with a smaller battery? So this is already in the design phase that we have to think about efficiency. And then, of course, in the lifetime, the model of leasing materials could indeed stimulate the efficiency of the use instead of buying and throwing away. Also, at the end of life, we have the things like collection and then the efficiency of dismantling and reprocessing. Yeah? But on each of these steps, we have possible losses. And so that means that on each of these steps, we have to think about to optimize the use of materials. It means that in each of these steps, we have to be creative and think about innovative processes to use and to optimize the use of the materials. If you just look at the supply side, so our company is maybe known as a recycling company, but it's not really correct. It's a materials company, and so we are also thinking about better performance materials. Yeah? But as the subject of this seminar is on supply, I will focus on the supply part and not on the performance part of materials. So if you look at the recycling parts, yeah, then it all starts with collection. So we have to think how to improve collection. So we have to do and to think about innovative business models as well. And so leasing indeed is a way to improve the collection. So our company offers already today the model of leasing precious metals, so that you don't buy the precious metals, but that you just lease them, and so you are motivated to give them back at the end of life. Then once the materials are collected, we have to make sure that they end up in the right collection recycling scheme. Today we all know that there is a lot of export, in fact there's nothing wrong with export of used materials. If they are used in a second life, that's okay, that's fine. But what we see too often is that in fact this export for second use is in fact a way to get rid of waste, and you just have to Google on electronic waste Africa, and then you can find a lot of pictures that illustrate that these materials are not exported always for second use, but just an easy way to get rid of it. So that's something we certainly have to avoid and to fight against. And then even if they are exported and even if they are used in a good way, we also have to look at how are they recycled over there. And it's important that we are open and are innovative to support also recycling in those countries where we have exported our second-hand materials. And finally, we have to look at the recycling step itself. And then there are two major steps in the recycling. That's first the dismantling, and then there is the metallurgical treatment. So in each of these steps, you can have a loss of material, and quality recycling will focus on the full value chain of the recycling. So that means from the collection to the export to the challenges in dismantling and metallurgical treatments. I will not go too much in detail here, but what are the key differences between recycling and primary supply? So first is that, and maybe I am now a little bit going against the problems that has been pictured by the people from the primary production, but primary production is basically a very well-known composition. So once you have export your mine, you know the composition of the mineral, and you can optimize your process. There are challenges, of course, yeah, and you can improve, but it's something known. So the difference with an urban mine is that it's always changing. So the products that are put on the market and that are coming back in collection, they are continuously changing. Yeah? So there's a challenge for the recycler to adopt its metallurgical process to this ever-changing composition. Yeah? There's an interesting challenge, and with the competences that we have acquired from the primary mineral extractions, we can build on that knowledge, so we can continue there, but it is a challenge. A second challenge is also the source as such. Whereas if you have a mine, yeah, it stays there. Yeah? Maybe you have, after 20, 30, 50 years, you have maybe to move to another place, but you have a limited number of stakeholders. You have the local community, you have the region where you are operating, and you have to talk with them. Whereas if you are mining the urban mine, you have a lot of customers that you have to motivate to involve in your process to collect and to bring back their products. So that means that you have to get into interaction with a lot of people, and that's also a huge difference compared with primary mining. So when we look at the process itself, it starts already with the design of the products. So urban mining is a very vertically integrated process. So that means that you have already to talk with the product designers to see how they can improve their product in order to have better recycling at the end. But recycling is not a target as such. The performance of the product is also an element that has to be taken into account in resource efficiency. It's possible that a product that is maybe more difficult to recycle has a better performance, and so in the overall life cycle has a better resource efficient performance. So next to the process design, there is the dismantling, shredding, and all these pre-treatment operations. There is still a lot of things to do to optimize this process and to make sure that the real critical elements are valorized, are collected and concentrated as much as possible. And then comes, of course, the metallurgical processes where we can, as said already, can build on experiences that we have from the primary mining. I will not go too much in detail on the roadmaps that has been already discussed this morning, so that's the advantage of being later in the schedule. But I would like to point out, so there are two major roadmap exercises done on improvement on recycling. And that's the Euromines roadmap. So Euromines is an, let's say, consortium, a group of mainly research institutes that work together and that have set a roadmap how to improve recycling. So they have defined 7 axes, let's say, topics to be investigated. I will not go too much in detail, but they look at it in a very vertical integrated way. So it starts already from optimized mining, valorization of the tailings in the mines, etc. And it goes down the road to product manufacturing, the use, the end of life, the collection, the processing, and the metallurgy at the end. And that's an important part, also a holistic view on the total life cycle assessment. And there is still a lot of things to do, that collection of information, of objective data. So that's an important part that we still have to develop to make real objective measurements of the performance of the full life cycle. Because, and that's something that comes then in the EIP on raw materials, so the European Innovation Partnership on Raw Materials. They have, it has been largely discussed this morning already, but I would like to emphasize one important part here, and that's the definition of quality of recycling. And it's, you can put targets on you have to recycle 50% of a battery, or you have to recycle 85% of a car, but how do you achieve that figure? So the quality on how you achieve this target has also to be discussed. And I would like to appeal on the policymakers here to think about this, that we define the quality of the full value chain and not just put a quantitative target. So this is, in fact, part of the non-technological part of the EIP on raw materials. I would like to conclude, in fact, here with saying that it is all interlinked. So there is a legal framework which, for us as a metals company, there is the directive on waste on electronic and electric equipment. There's the end of life of vehicles, the battery, the waste framework directive. So this is the framework, and next to that there are these roadmap exercises. And out of these roadmap exercises, there will come new targets and new challenges for the recycling industry, which will be translated into legislative work. But the main focus should be to do more with less. Yeah? This is, in fact, the message, and that comes back in all these roadmaps. So I would like to keep it on this. So these are the main messages from a materials company. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for this unique presentation. You remind us about WE directive, electronic and electrical recycling. I'm shadow reporter, and also Mr. Paul Rubik, who is he's vice chair for raw materials group in the European Parliament. Very important. Thank you. I'm very pleased to welcome Ambassador of Chile, His Excellency, Mr. Carlos Balbontin, welcome, and also Mr. Paul Rubik, who is Vice Chair for Raw Materials Group in Europe. Now, you continue to our last part in this meeting, but very important, I would say, strategic cooperation, Europe and another part of the world. First presentation is Professor Neale, Istanbul Technical University. His presentation is raw materials, demand, supply of the European Union, and possibles for cooperation with Turkey. Very important, Professor Neale. We have a floor.
First page. Okay.
You change through here.
Here or there?
Just maximize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished member of the European Parliament, dear Ambassador of the Chile, and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Panayotov and Mr. Johansson for the organizing this kind of the meeting and their co-worker at the same time. I'm going to explain about the raw material requirement in Europe and the position of Turkey. As all of you know that raw materials and natural sources plays a great role of the human being life and the civilization. And all the civilization is started with the production of the raw materials. As you know, the Industrial Revolution started with the found of the coal in Europe first time. The consumption of the raw material highly related with development of the countries. For instance, in United States, one person is used about 20 tons of the raw material every year. This figure is about 13 tons in Germany, and the average 10 tons in the European Union. It is about 5 tons in Turkey. The raw material, which is selected from the European Union, they are metals or minerals, is 40. And as you've seen from this picture, there are 3 different classes. The first, the raw material, which they supply easily. The second classes is critical raw materials, and the third is they are supplied little bit difficulty. This raw material in Europe European industry is necessary in next years, and this is calculated for the 2030. And as I can say that the 34 of this raw material is found in Turkey, and then some of them is produced at the same time. And 14 critical for supply, because they are supplied from the China, from Brazil, from some African countries, and these 14 critical raw materials, about 11 of them is found in Turkey. Now I'm going to say something about the Turkish mining activities. As you know, all of the raw material is coming from the mining activities. And the world production of the mines is increasing every year. It was in 2011, 95 billion tons, the world production. Turkey is a semi-arid plateau between the Eurasian and the African continents. Mining history of Turkey can be traced back to 7,000 before Christ. There are 70 economical minerals, and the value of known reserves are calculated as $2.5 trillion US dollars. Turkey stays on the first places in the world with the reserves of boron, zeolite, and the pumice. And in Turkey, we have significant reserves of the trona, thorium, rare earths, profilite, celestite, barite, feldspar, chromite, copper, lead, zinc, magnesite, gold, coal, marble, and all kinds of the ornamental stones. And there are 20,000 licensed mines and 6,500 from them in operation. Mineral and coal production in Turkey were altogether 500 million tons, which 150 million is the metals, and 350 millions were industrial minerals and, let's say, ornamental stones, plus cement, raw materials, and the aggregates. And the total value of this production is 16 billion US dollar. And the export of the minerals is 3.8 in 2011. The contribution of the mining in gross national product was 2% in year 2011. This is the mining map of the Turkey. As you've seen, a lot of different mine is staying in Anatolia, or we call it as a minor Asia. In the west part of the country, the more mine you realize. But in the east part, it's not explored yet because of the geologists. They like to be close to the seaside, not the mountainside. This is the known mineral reserves of Turkey, and this is the imported reserves of Turkey in the world and their order. As you've seen, most of them belong to the critical list of the European Union. This is the mineral export in last 5 years. And this is the distribution of export by mineral types. Natural stones in the first place, as you've seen, and the second, metallic ores, industrial minerals, then others. As a conclusion, the 40 minerals and the metals were classified as a raw material of European industry by European Union. 14 raw materials of them called as a critical. 34 of mentioned raw materials exist and have been produced in Turkey. The value of the mineral production of Turkey is $16 billion in 2011. If integrated value of the industrial production are calculated instead of raw materials, the value of production based on the minerals and the coal are increasing to $25 billion. It is not a real figure. According to our calculation, it could increase to 4 times. It's $100 billion per annum. It is coming from the lack of the investment. In the recent years, domestic consumption of the minerals are increasing because of the development of Turkey. Many of the minerals are used in domestic industry, like copper, aluminum, gold, silver, coal, feldspar, and others. And Turkey is open to foreign investment in all scales for exploration and the production in mining. As an example, in last 10 years, 9 feasible gold mines were found by some of the foreign companies, and 6 of them are in operation, which produced 35 tons last year, 2012, of gold and 40 tons a year silver. It is increasing rapidly. And I can say that if the European finance come to Turkey and make an investment, and in that case, most of the requirement of the European industry can easily supply raw material from Turkey. And then these critical materials, which very difficult they're supplying, and then overcome in that way. don't forget that raw materials is coming from the mining industry. This is very important because recycling, okay, but recycling only, let's say, 10% of the world demand is from the recycling. And the speed of recycling change. For instance, now the recycling of the iron is going down because of the many of the old iron slags, iron tailings were already evaluated. This is very important, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Ünal. This cooperation between Turkey and Europe will be very, very beneficial for both sides. I just want to tell you that all presentations, performance will be available online after the seminar, after our event. Now, allow me to give the floor to His Excellency, Ambassador of Republic Chile, Senor Carlos Balbontin. He has a very impressive day because he has a guest from Chilean Parliament. They are here. Welcome also. And Mr. Balbontin is a very big friend to Europe. He make very big efforts to develop negotiation between Europe and Chile, and very, very successfully. Congratulations for this. And now, Your Excellency, you have the floor, please.
Dear Dr. Panayotov, Dr. Johansson, members of the European Parliament, dear friends, allow me to begin my brief words, thanking for the opportunity of being present in this very high level panel in this seminar. And I have to confess that I'm a little ashamed because I'm not an expert in the issues that you are discussing today, though I will try to give up some ideas that can, I hope, help in your deliberations from the perspective of the South, of the countries that provide raw materials to the industry in other parts of the world. And allow me to begin saying that it's a fact today that given the price of the commodities, the effect that that increase have in our economies has two sides. A brilliant one, because we are having more capitals, a flow of capitals. We're having more profits for the national budgets, for our development. But on the other hand, there is also a problem related to, first, the primarization of our industries. Second, the environment. Third, the energetic problems that we're facing to supply that increasing demand from the international markets. Hence, it is obvious the importance that today in this economic interdependent world, in this globalized economy, has the relation between demand in one side and offer in the other side related to commodities, to raw materials. And that put us facing a very important challenge, a huge challenge that is not only related to the demand, but also to the offer, but also to the demand from the industrialized countries. Understanding that that demand needs security in the provision of raw materials in order to keep the productive effort, security also in the demand, because the dependence of the countries in the offer side, the risk of increasing the production of commodities, of raw materials in our countries without an effort, a balanced effort in order to get more innovation, to add value, in order to get more technological transfer, is very high. Is very high. And then must be a very, I would say, virtuous association that keep us in this line of production and can impulse the entrepreneurial and investment effort from other parts of the world. And which is the link, which is the bond, the bridge between both sides? First, of course, investments. But not any kind of investments. We just have in January, at the end of January in Santiago, the first summit between the community of Latin American and Caribbean states and the European Union. That was a gathering of 60 heads of state and government from our countries. And the main topic of the summit was precisely investments. But not, as I said, any kind of investments. Investments with social and environmental quality. And that was very important because the conclusions of the summit that are in a joint declaration of the heads of state and government and in an action plan has a precise chapter related to investments. And in that chapter, with concrete actions to be that have been agreed between our 60 countries, there is a place, an important place of the topic of this seminar. In second place, besides investments, the other link, the other bridge, is of course the technological transference. With what purpose? With the purpose of giving add value to the production of raw materials in the origin. Then we will be able to include the offer in this virtuous chain of production. And that commitment, that agreement, will allow us to work together in terms of innovation, of new products, and of course of adding value to this effort from the part of the investment side. But this commitment is also related to the sustainability in order of keeping some standards, the highest possible standards, related with the production, extraction production, and import of our raw materials. Let me give you a couple of figures. I don't want to abuse of your attention. But the 200 main international companies of coal, gas, and oil multiply by 5 their investments up to almost $700 billion last year, just last year, in the development of new projects all over the world. These figures indicate that the economic factor is very important in the determination of the environment policies in those countries which are responsible of these activities. And that the economic factor, the economic element, is relevant in the decision-making process from the part of these companies and these governments. To conclude, let me state that this cannot be apart, must be associated with our duties in terms of environment, in terms of our way of living. In the way in which our countries can face this challenge, huge challenge, as I said, with vision of future, thinking in what will happen. And I want to bother you with more figures that I have regarding this particular topic. But there are some red lights not very far away in time, in the next decades, regarding what we are doing in terms of emissions, in climate change, etc. But in the way in which we are able to face the challenge, we can be in the right way building a virtuous association between the offer of raw materials and the demand of raw materials. And then the industry will have a better role, I think, in the sustainability, not just of our environment, but also in the productive effort that we welcome, of course. And that must be focused from the perspective of the sustainable development, not just for our countries in the south, but also for our countries all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your Excellency, you said that you are not specialist, but you prepare our program for next 10 years. How we can do this, this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Find time in this very
Thank you very much.
precious time. Now we have two very important speakers, but don't worry, you have permission for stay here a little bit longer. That's enough time for presentation and for discussion. Now, big pleasure, I give the floor to Mr. Robert Poland, Economic Minister Chancellor, U.S. Mission to the European Union. The item is U.S. perspectives on sustainable raw materials. Very important for us. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. Special thank you to Mr. Panayotov and Mr. Johansson for hosting this important event. You know, I can say truthfully I am not an expert in this area, especially in comparison to many of the speakers, but it's a topic that has always personally interested me. Many years ago when I was in graduate school, I was looking into studying the foreign economic policy of the U.S. after World War II, and one of the topics I chose to study was raw materials. And I think one of the things, it's because it was seen as a strategic objective. But I think nowadays people recognize that sustainability is also part of our important part of our foreign policy as well. I'm sure that everyone here knows that certain raw materials, especially rare earths, are essential to making products in a wide variety of innovative high-tech and green tech industries. such things as computer hard drives, display and efficient lighting, generators and turbines, and permanent magnets inside of motors of electric vehicles, for example, are some of the things that we rely on these materials. The Obama administration believes that these industries are essential for long-term economic growth and jobs in the U.S. They are also important for developing the types of clean energy technologies that will make this growth possible in an environmentally responsible way. We also recognize the importance of working with partners like the European Union to expand our knowledge of these critical materials, to develop the technologies to recycle the materials that are already in use, and to identify substitute materials when possible. Many leaders in the European Union share these beliefs and understand the importance of access to raw materials in the 21st century. As many developing countries are modernizing, they too are increasing their consumption of many types of raw materials. So this combination of factors in the global economy has resulted in recent years in a significant increase in global demand for certain raw materials. You would think that given basic principles of supply and demand would mean there would be a properly functioning marketplace, that in other words, that supply would rise to meet growing demand. But for a number of reasons that's beyond the scope of today's discussion, recent global demand and supply shifts have altered the dynamics within some raw material markets, resulting in insufficient supply to meet growing demand. In the U.S., the Obama administration is committed to reducing the demand for and at the same time increasing the supplies of raw materials. While this is a comprehensive all-of-government approach, let me just cite a few examples of what we mean. The U.S. government, in conjunction with private sector stakeholders, is working to reduce demand for raw materials by exploring how to use such materials more efficiently through providing incentives for reuse, recycling, and remanufacturing. Through a sustainable materials management, what we call SMM approach, the United States is helping to change the way that our society protects the environment and conserves resources for future generations. SMM is a systemic approach that seeks to reduce materials use and their associated environmental impacts over their entire life cycle, starting with the extraction of natural resources and product design, and ending with decisions on recycling or final disposal. This approach changes how we think about environmental protection and recognizes the impact of the vast amounts of materials that we consume. And I was very interested to hear the statistic from the professor, because that's a nice segue to some statistics I just looked up myself. I was interested to look at some of the history of U.S. How much generation of waste in the United States in recent decades, and how much we recycle, because I've seen it in my own lifetime and it interests me a great deal. I found that Americans generate about 2 kilos of municipal solid waste per capita per day. And that's a very high number. It's too high. It is down, however, from recent years. It's about the same level as it was in the 1990s. But more importantly, at the same time, our recycling efforts are way, way up. Back in 1960, when I was a kid growing up in St. Louis, the United States nationally only recycled about 6% of this waste. And then in the 1980s, when I was reading about raw materials and foreign policy, we got up to 10%. Well, recently there's been a real spike, and we're now at 34% total recycling. So that in itself is an important resource. Just to cite a couple sub-examples, paper recycling is 72%, metals at 35%. And again, compared to Europe, I suspect these numbers are not good enough, but it's a vast improvement, and I think it's an important and good trend. We've also seen, of course, huge gains in efficiency in uses of energy and many other materials. The U.S. federal government is also a leader in encouraging the sound management of electronics, particularly in its influence in the market as a major purchaser and user of electronics. For example, federal agencies are required to purchase greener electronics under an executive order issued by President Obama in 2009. This means that federal agencies have to buy electronics and computers that are energy efficient, that contain less hazardous materials, that have a longer product life, and have other sustainable attributes. Additionally, the Obama administration has released the National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship in July 2011. This strategy outlines specific federal actions to address the growing e-waste problems and to ensure good electronic stewardship. We're also looking at ways to increase our technological capacity to diversify our sources of supply of raw materials. We continue to look for new mines in places like the United States, but also Australia, Canada, and many other countries. We're also looking for ways to diversify the processing along the supply chain. And we're working with private sector interests to ensure that the technology exists to mine and refine rare earths in an environmentally sustainable manner. Most recently in January 2013 this year, the U.S. Department of Energy announced its latest energy innovation hub. It's called the Critical Materials Institute, or CMI, and they've been awarded $120 million to fund research over the next 5 years. CMI's world-class team, which includes researchers from national laboratories, universities, and industry, will seek to develop new extraction methods to diversify supply, to find alternatives to critical materials, and to increase reuse and recycling. Researchers will also seek to develop economic analyses in an effort to identify supply constraints in the future. The CMI will further seek solutions that can be applied at all stages of a material's life cycle, from new ways to access it at the source and to better ways to recycle and reuse it. At the same time, the CMI will focus on finding new earth-abundant alternatives that could replace critical materials at lower cost and with equal or better performance. Ladies and gentlemen, leaders in the US and the EU recognize that we face common challenges with respect to raw materials and that we are both better served by aligning our interests in solving our common challenges. Our cooperation, as Dr. Tominelli mentioned, is managed under the auspices of the Transatlantic Economic Council and also the US-EU Energy Council. Since 2007, the TEC has been the primary forum of discussions between the US and the EU on regulatory innovation and other initiatives that are designed to draw our economies closer together and also to, not coincidentally, generate jobs and growth. On the US side, senior White House officials and cabinet members have participated in the TEC. And on the EU side, commissioners and directors generals have led the discussion, with participation notably by members of the European Parliament, who have played an important role in US-EU cooperation in this area. The TEC has developed a comprehensive 5-part work plan devoted to raw materials. The 5 parts of this work plan are: first, trade cooperation; second, raw materials data, flows, and information sharing; third, resource efficiency. Fourth, research and development in substitution and product design. And fifth, waste shipments. So if you haven't seen the work plan, I'd encourage you to review it and see the broad range of ongoing US-EU cooperation on raw materials. This is at many levels of many parts of our government. We're also working, again, as Dr. Tominelli said, with the EU and Japan and other countries to increase our awareness and research cooperation on critical materials under the US-EU Energy Council. And as he mentioned, on May 29-30, there will be a conference here in Brussels devoted to new models in efficient management of management of critical materials, in which the US, EU, and Japanese, and now I hear other counterparts, will share their approaches on this important issue. So in closing, governments, research institutions, business, and consumer stakeholders must all engage with a common purpose to ensure that a sufficient and reliable supply of raw materials exists to create innovative new products which will lead to environmentally friendly jobs and growth in the 21st century. And I think this conference is a very good illustration of that. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for this review. It's very encouraging to enhance our cooperation, United States of Europe. This is very, very optimistic for us. Ladies and gentlemen, you see that our meeting is between, not among countries, among continents, United States, Latin America, Europe, Brazil, and now Australia. First time in our meetings, in our events, take part Australia is incredible, interesting for us. Welcome, and I give you the floor, please. Mr. Greg McLachlan, Minister and Deputy Head of Mission, Australian Embassy, and Mission, the European Union also. You have the floor.
Professor, thanks very much, and thanks also to Mr. Johansson for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm conscious I'm the last speaker, and many of you are probably hungry, so I'll try and be brief. I really am just going to make three basic points today, plus I'm going to give you a little bit of an advertorial. Really the first point, and it's kind of an obvious one, is that there can be no sustainable access to raw materials without a sustainable resources sector to begin with. Second, that sustainable access to raw materials is really best achieved through a transparent and efficient functioning market. And thirdly, that sustainable mining actually offers a good pathway to development. Now the advertorial. It occurs to me that, while you can now get to Australia in a quarter of the time it took Offenbach to get from Köln to Paris, not many of you might know much about Australia. And while anyone who's read the Financial Times will know that the economic conditions in Australia are actually pretty good at the moment. We had a budget handed down this week. We have economic growth of 2.75%, unemployment's 5.5%, inflation 2.5%, which is in smack bang in the middle of our target zone. And there is a perception that, in fact, a lot of this is simply because we're well endowed with mineral resources, we're handy with a shovel, and all of our neighbours to the north will buy whatever we dig up. And it's true, mining is an important part of our economy, but it's not all of our economy. And in fact, a good reason why our economy is so strong today is actually because of not chance, but really the choices we've made over the past 30 years in terms of economic reform and so on. That said, mining is an important part of our economy. It is only 7% of our GDP. It represents 220,000, or employs 220,000 people, which is actually a fairly small proportion of the employment market. It drives investment at the moment. We have in April 2012, we had 104 mining projects that had been through the board approval phase, and that represents about $173 billion worth of mining projects, with another 350 projects sort of still going through approval processes. And next year we expect mining investment to reach a record 8% of GDP. Some of these projects clearly aren't going to proceed as quickly as they might have simply because of the way the world economy is developing. And yet the majority will proceed, and they'll proceed in a manner that actually satisfies longer term demand. And of course, in terms of exports, mining represents 49% of our exports, and we expect the volumes to increase, to triple over the period between the year 2000 and sometime in the 2020s. Our principal exports are coal and iron ore. Our third largest export, in fact, has been education services up until about a year or two ago. Critically, I think we see the mining sector in Australia as being sustainable and sustainable for the longer term. And so the question, which is really the first point I wanted to do, what do we mean when we talk about a sustainable mining industry? Because there's a lot of sustainable people think naturally, automatically of the environmental aspect, but really what we're talking about in a sustainable mining industry is the interaction between government and industry and society. And it's really trying to ensure that this complex and constantly evolving three-way set of obligations works in a manner that actually enables you to reap the benefits of mining for all three of the stakeholders. And the situation is quite complex, of course, because governments' views of the mining sector and its benefits that it can deliver actually evolve over time. They're a subject of policy, of course, and those policies change. They change when governments change. They change within the terms of governments. Commercial interests of miners change, and the community now has to be thought not simply of the community that lives next door to the mine, but the community in the wider nation and, frankly, the community abroad as well. Mining countries like Australia really have to walk a fine line between social expectations and commercial reality in trying to find, if you like, a basis for sustainable mining. And so these days, really, being environmentally sound, socially responsible and commercially viable are all inseparable concepts for resource sector participants. And as a government, really, without the rational implementation of sustainable development mining practices, it's more difficult really for us to realise the benefits of mining. After all, the benefits for economic development and poverty reduction that can flow from a financially viable mining sector are very difficult to obtain if mining companies are locked in litigation or community blockages, or their skilled employees actually find alternative areas for employment, or through public pressure mining companies can't even obtain licences in the first place. So how is it that Australia walks this fine line of sustainable mining? And in short, it's really with the aid of a mix of policy settings and regulations that encourage investment in capital, but also investment in people, in skills, that protect the environment, that enable the government to secure the dividends that flow from mining, but critically also enable the government to spend those dividends in a way that society can see benefit itself, and so therefore give it a stake in the mining sector and its boom. And really, at the heart of all of this, what underlies our approach is a commitment to transparency. That the better information and the more easily information is available to not only to government but to market and to other participants, really the more soundly based are going to be the policies and the decisions that we all make. And not only does this help make economies less vulnerable to shocks and panics and imbalances and the typical sort of boom-bust cycle that we see with commodities, it also helps give our society confidence that the regulatory system is delivering the best return for individuals, their communities and the wider economy. And this is, I won't go into the detail, but it's precisely this sort of transparent approach and trilateral kind of approach, if you like, that we're adopting in examining how we might best develop coal seam gas in Australia. Coal seam gas has the potential actually to outstrip our reserves of LNG, yet its coal seam gas is located in near populated areas, and so it raises a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the shale gas debate here in Europe. But I'll say that for another time. People can ask me later. Essentially, transparency, because our legislation, our regulations and our policies are transparent, people really know what to expect when they come to Australia to do business. And so that really benefits not only the mining sector, of course, but it contributes to a lower sovereign risk for us and has flow-on benefits for the rest of the economy. So that in a sense is sort of how we approach the concept of a sustainable mining sector. So when we look at the question of sustainable access to commodities, we're a consumer of commodities and energy, of course, but we really do approach this from the point of view of a supplier because we are a net energy and minerals exporter. And to give you a sense of this, Australia depends on coal for about 77% of our electricity generation. And yet in 2010-11, Australia produced 327.5 million tonnes of black saleable coal, and 85% of that was exported. So really you can see from this that the demand that we place on coal through our own domestic consumption is actually pretty small. And really the volume of coal that we export is not dependent on the changing levels of domestic consumption. And what applies to coal actually applies to pretty much every commodity we produce, not just in minerals and energy, but also including in agricultural commodities. So it's not going to surprise you very much when I tell you that Australian governments are pretty much convinced on the importance of a global market, the importance of a global market that's kept reasonably liberal and transparent. And to be honest, this is really what we largely see, I think, in global commodity prices. There's been a lot of speculation about what has caused the spike in commodity prices over the past few years. And really we see this as reflecting demand and supply constraints in the main. I'll come to the exceptions in a minute. And to give you an idea, I mean, a mining project like the Olympic Dam in South Australia takes 14 years from when it's a twinkle in somebody's eye until it starts producing product. It costs a lot of money to develop some of these mines, $750 million. And really what we're seeing, I think, over the past few years is the lag effect of what has been an underinvestment in the mining sector for at least a decade or more in the period leading up to the turn of this century. And now we're seeing a response to that. And to give you an example, in 1999, the mining sector invested about $5.6 billion in the mining sector in Australia. Last financial year, the current financial year, 2012, 2013, and the next financial year, the mining sector is going to invest in excess of $100 billion a year. So in a sense, what we have seen in high prices is a disconnect between supply and demand, generally speaking. What we are now seeing, in fact, is actually supply starting to catch up. Investments are going in, not just in Australia, but globally. And we're also seeing that prices are coming off, not simply because of increased investment, but because of the global economic situation. There have, of course, been problems, and we've heard earlier speakers allude to that. And export restrictions is obviously an issue in this area. The important thing to note there, I think, as well, is that we are seeing the market respond to this. I know at least of one Australian company that has a major investment in a rare earths mine in Western Australia. And of course, there are legal avenues through the WTO that are being pursued in this. And finally, we don't leave it all to the market. We do engage in a series of dialogues with our most important customers, and they're principally the states of Northeast Asia and the United States. Quickly, just on the question of development, from an Australian perspective, I mean, we see a properly administered resources sector as really being a key way in which we can alleviate poverty and support broader economic development. It's not actually just us, it's the UN Committee on Sustainable Development happens to agree with us on that, or we agree with them. But clearly the capacity of mining to do this for developing countries really is underpinned by that sort of trilateral, if you like, mutual obligation that we are talking about at the outset. Australia is actually working very closely with developing countries, particularly in our region, to help them reap the benefits of a sustainable mining system, mining sector rather. And we've done that in part through our aid program. In 2010, we had an independent review of our aid program and its effectiveness. And as a consequence of that, we made improving incomes, employment and enterprise opportunities for poor people, including through the development of sustainable mining industries, one of our aid objectives. And through that, we've been focusing on helping developing countries develop systems of governance and other means to support sustainable mining. For example, we are working very closely with the Papua New Guinea government on its effort to develop a sovereign wealth fund to support if you like, to manage the profits that will flow from the LNG project that is now getting underway in that country, which will be the largest mining project that it has, or resource extraction project. Very quickly, we do a few other things. We're very engaged with the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. It's something we've supported since 2007. We're now in the process of running a pilot project to actually apply the principles of the initiative in Australia. We have a $123.7 million, it's roughly Australian and US dollars are roughly even value. And that's aimed at helping developing governance within resource-rich countries. And then we also have a communication strategy based on social responsibility in the mining and metals sector in developing country, which targets and is supported by mining firms themselves. And in fact, actually that product really drew from the experiences of Australian firms overseas, their lessons, and some of their lessons, frankly, were hard learnt. But it's illustrative also, I guess, of the extent to which we see Australian companies as being part of our broader national effort, if you like, to help promote the ideas of sustainable development in the mining sector more broadly. Just in Africa, to give you a sense of how many Australian companies are out there, in Africa we have about 230 Australian resource companies active in Africa. There are 650 projects in 42 countries. It's basically 40% of our overseas projects. And their projects there are worth about 24 billion with another 17 billion US at the feasibility stage. And companies like BHP and Rio Tinto actually play a really important role in spreading the concepts of sustainability. BHP would put in almost $250 million into corporate social responsibility initiatives. And firms like BHP and Rio Tinto are really at the forefront of work under the voluntary principles on security and human rights, which is an initiative which Australia joined in February and targets resource companies working in the developing world. It's really a good example, I think, of how, if I go right back to where I started from, this idea of sustainable development, sustainable resource exploitation is really about trying to get the three, if you like, broad groups of stakeholders and finding the balance between all our interests. And that's really the foundation you need to ensure that you have a sustainable sector and sustainable access to the resources in the longer term. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. It's very nice, very useful, very good presentation. And I'm very glad that you establish this cooperation between us. Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is finished. Unfortunately, no time for discussion. I know that a lot of people have questions. Please send your questions to my staff, to my assistants, and see how to organize the answers. I promise for the next event will be enough time for discussion. And now I give the floor to my co-organizer and friend, Ken Johansson, for conclusions.
I will just make a few ending remarks, and that's to the discussion that we now have in the Parliament, and especially in the ITRE committee, the industry committee, and it was also Mr. Rubig who was here before attending in that discussion.
He missed the flight, that's why he's late.
But when we discuss the economical situation in Europe and especially in some member states, of course that is discussed in the economic committee. But I used to say when we should discuss the future of Europe to have a growth, economical growth and sustainable growth, the industrial committee is as important as the economic committee, because we need to discuss sustainable growth in the future and the situation in the future. And then to say that when we have done this, for example, in the committee where we started the discussion about the new research program, which you have heard about, Horizon 2020, then we invited participants to be in that debate from all over the world, because we think even if we come from different constituencies in the member states, I think that the future debate in Europe is very important that we have that together with the discussion in other parts of the world, and that we see it globally, especially when we discuss the future. When we discussed yesterday, it was a discussion about the industrial policy. That was then the organizers there also have invited from South Korea, United States and Japan. In that perspective, we discussed that to find and to examine in the way we can learn from each other, but also cooperate in a better way. So I think this has also been, for me, being in the industrial committee and working with Horizon 2020 and industrial policy, it has been very good to listen to this discussion. And in the end, I just also want to say thank you to my friend, Professor Panayotov. I will be very personal in that way. I have been in the European Parliament for 2 years. Before that, I was a regional minister in west part of Sweden. And then the former member of the European Parliament from our constituency, she's now the environmental minister in Sweden. And she gave me some advice, because you should do that to the person who comes after. And one of them was continue the good cooperation with Professor Panayotov. She then said, he's a very good example of a good scientist and a professor and a good member of European Parliament. And I think that taking the initiative for this and this, I think she had a true advice to me. Thank you, Mr. Professor Panayotov.
Thank you. And two sentences. What's the main output of this meeting today? We coordinate our vision. Some controversial a little bit point. Some ideas, because you need to coordinate in one stream, because I don't believe that life will be easier and more relaxable for the future, because you have some challenges, fossil fuels finish, climate change, and also raw materials, they're also limited. To overcome all these things for the future, we need to be together. We need to cooperate to overcome all this crisis and any future crisis, and to say the people in the United States, in Europe, in Brazil, in Australia, everywhere, you never suffer again, because we take the proper measure, we are ready to defend for any type of crisis. So, thank you for this event, thank you for your participation, participants, representative embassy, representative of so great enterprises. I hope we'll see you again for our next meeting. All the best, the great health and success, you and your families. Thank you.